You definitely don't want to miss that. Our Smarty SIM comes packed with 30 gigs of data and unlimited calls and texts for just £10 a month on a 1-month plan. That's why Smarty won Best Value SIM-only network in the U-Switch Mobile Awards 2020. Don't miss out. Search Smarty Mobile. Smarty. Simple, honest mobile. Smarty.co.uk.
Picture in your mind a stylish Audi with striking LED headlights, sporty alloy wheels, and some of our most advanced features, including a 10-inch digital cockpit and smart assistant systems like lane departure warning. Picture what that Audi looks like. Now think smaller. The Audi A1. It's not a small car, it's a small Audi. Visit audi.co.uk. Audi. Vorsprung durch Technik.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Off earlier lows, but U.S. stocks are still down for day number 3 as tensions between the U.S. and China heat up. President Donald Trump threatened what sounded like a resumption of the trade war should Beijing fail to meet the terms of an agreement signed in January to buy more American products. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day. The S&P 500 is down 0.25%, down 7. Dow Jones Industrial Average is down 0.6%, down 143. And the NASDAQ is up 0.6%, up 50. The 10-year's down 11/32 with a yield of 0.64%. West Texas Intermediate Crude is up 2.5% at $20.29 a barrel. COMEX Gold is up 0.8% at $17.1440 an ounce. The dollar yen, 106.97. The euro, $1.914. The British pound, $1.2435. Tesla CEO Elon Musk has listed 2 of his California homes for sale this past weekend, days after announcing he would get rid of most of his possessions. He's seeking a combined $39.5 million for his Bel Air properties, including one that was previously owned by the late Gene Wilder. Both are for sale by owner. Right now, Tesla is up 5.5%. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Bloomberg Markets is brought to you by Commonwealth Financial Network. For the 6th straight time, J.D. Power ranks Commonwealth #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms. Visit commonwealth.com to learn more. Well, we're pretty much through earnings season this quarter, but I'm not sure how much investors have really learned with so many companies pulling back on guidance and so many companies just saying, we really don't know how our business is going to perform for the remainder of the year. To get a sense of how we might navigate the remainder of 2020 from an investment perspective, we welcome Eddie Perkin, Chief Equity Investment Officer for Eaton Vance. They've got $518 billion under management. They're based in Boston. Eddie, thanks so much for joining us. What are the takeaways that you and your team have gleaned from the earnings reports we've seen over the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, first of all. But I don't think we've learned a whole lot, to be honest. Most companies have pulled guidance at this point, which is what you would expect. Earnings generally were okay relative to significantly lowered expectations. And I think the future is highly uncertain. Warren Buffett said it over the weekend at the Berkshire Hathaway shareholder meeting. The range of outcomes remains very, very wide. And, I think it's probably foolish to think that a CEO or CFO of a company is going to have any better idea of what's likely to transpire in the economy in the coming months. So I think we're living in a world of uncertainty, and we all need to get used to it.
All right, Eddie, since you mentioned Warren Buffett, let's go there. A lot of people took his moves in the first quarter and frankly in April as well of being a net seller of stocks into the weakness and not making any investments. Just to give you a sense, his cash pile is now 1/3 of his market cap of Berkshire Hathaway with more than $130 billion of cash sitting there. Do you take that, Eddie, as a bearish signal, a sign that he sees further losses ahead that investors should heed?
I think you always have to pay attention to what Warren Buffett is up to. He's obviously a great investor. He has a war chest. He made some very smart moves in the 2008-2009 period. I think a couple of differences this time around. One is everything rebounded so quickly that even for someone like Buffett who can move very quickly, things kind of got away from him very quickly. He said, he was starting to get phone calls from people who needed capital, but as soon as the Fed came in and backstopped everything, it kind of ran away from him and the phone calls stopped. So I just think the rebound in the markets was so quick that he didn't have a chance to move. I do find it interesting that he spent an extensive portion of the call making the optimistic case for America and America is resilient, that sort of language. But then his actions were very much opposite to that, where he was selling his airline stocks and not putting fresh money to work in the market. So I think, pay attention to his actions perhaps more than his words.
So Eddie, are you in that camp that feels like maybe this rebound off of that initial 33% decline in the market, this rebound where we've retraced maybe half of that decline? And granted, it's due to all the liquidity put in the marketplace and the federal stimulus and things like that. But is it too much, too fast, and do you not trust it?
I'm tempted to go there. I think that feels right. The problem is I have a lot of company with that view. I think that's the consensus view in the market right now, and I think people are sort of scratching their heads as to how we were able to recover so quickly when the fundamentals of the global economy are still highly uncertain. The way I would try to size it, again, operating within a wide range of uncertainty, is if you look at 2021 estimates, so next year, not 2020, which is kind of a lost cause at this point, but 2021 estimates for 2021 earnings are about 20% below what they were forecast to be just a few months ago, and so that's the hit to next year's earnings. That's probably not all permanent, and probably estimates were too high to begin with. But let's say earnings are down, kind of for several years and into the future, 10%, and then you use a higher risk premium given all the uncertainty. Maybe the right markdown for stocks is about 15%, given what we know today. That's about where the broad market averages are, and so maybe the market's got it about right. I think what's interesting is beneath the surface you have large cap growth stocks, which are barely down at all, and in some cases are higher, and you have beaten up small caps, deep value stocks, energy, financials that are down 30 to 50%. So I think the interesting calls to make are beneath the surface, not with the market aggregates.
All right, so let's go there with the Russell 2000 in particular, because I was looking at the earnings figures so far. We're about halfway through the earnings season, and the Russell 2000 companies are getting beaten up way more than the bigger ones. Not that surprising. Are you going to make a contrarian case and say that it's time to pile in and that that's all been priced in?
I wouldn't be as bold as that, but I would say at the margin, that's where investors should be putting money. I think you should be putting money into value stocks at the margin. You should be putting money into small cap stocks at the margin. If you look at, I was looking at a graph the other day on Bloomberg, actually, of the Russell 1000 growth versus the Russell 2000 value. So large growth versus small value over the last 3 years. And large growth had beaten small value by nearly 90% cumulatively. So you're now at a point where the large cap growth stocks, the big tech stocks, are at they're at a 60% premium to the market valuation, and small cap values at a 50% discount. So there's a very wide range from a valuation perspective that I think, as a value investor, I'm highly tempted by. But the timing of that call is difficult, so I would do it very gradually, dollar cost average it, and kind of rebalance into the part of the market that is lag behind.
Eddie, thank you so much for being with us. Eddie Perkin is Chief Equity Investment Officer at Eaton Vance, overseeing more than $500 billion at that firm from Boston, which is the headquarters. And right now I'm looking at the Russell 2000, and it's down more than NASDAQ. It's down about 0.4%. We are going to catch up with Dave Wilson at the 11 a.m. hour. It's my favorite segment where we talk about small caps versus large caps. I really do love that. I mean, it's just been such an interesting story. We'll continue with more conversations about markets ahead. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Starting the new week in the red. Stocks are lower despite data showing coronavirus infections continue to slow. The Dow falling more than 190 points. Ahead this week, the April jobs report. Almost 23 million jobs were created in the U.S. in the last decade. In a single month, they were all but wiped out. The forecast in a Bloomberg survey calls for an eye-popping 21 million plunge in payrolls, the most in records going back to 1939. President Trump is promising more federal help for jobless Americans, but there is a catch. He said the next round of stimulus must include a payroll tax cut. That's an idea that even Republican lawmakers haven't embraced. And may the 4th be with you. Disney releases its latest Star Wars film, The Rise of Skywalker, on its Disney Plus streaming service today, 2 months sooner than expected. The coronavirus has accelerated the shift toward home viewing. Courtney Donahoe, Bloomberg Radio.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
At age 30, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, you can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Economics.
Are we still ultra-accommodative?
Finance.
Do you see this as a technical correction?
Investment.
The markets move seismically.
The Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast.
Mistakes are made when you sell something because you need to sell it.
Tom Keene, Jonathan Perrow, and the names that shape the world's markets.
We speak with Professor Schiller of Yale University.
David Solomon, the Goldman Sachs CEO, joins me.
Bloomberg Surveillance. Listen today at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts. In-depth analysis, concise reporting.
Introducing the new single, Impossible. From Central American rock and blues trio, Steady Rolling. Their epic story of love and loss continues. Download and stream the single, Impossible, from the band Steady Rolling, wherever good music lives.
Did you know that players of People's Postcode Lottery have raised over £500 million for charities and good causes? They've also won £63 million in prizes so far this year, and it could be your postcode next. Visit postcodelottery.co.uk/radio before midnight on the 21st of May to play in the June draws. PPL manage lotteries on behalf of good causes. 16+. Conditions apply. Play responsibly.
Football boots that will help her score her first hat-trick. The tech that keeps you connected. The cozy jumpers that are perfect for snuggling up together. With a choice of ways to pay, you can make the most of family time. You can say yes when it matters most at very.co.uk. Goods and services provided by Shop Direct Home Shopping Limited. Credit provided by Shop Direct Finance Company Limited.
A half-price dream holiday, wouldn't want to miss that. A takeaway for free, wouldn't want to miss that. And 30 gigs data for just £10 a month on Smarty Mobile. You definitely don't want to miss that. Our Smarty SIM comes packed with 30 gigs of data and unlimited calls and texts for just £10 a month on a 1-month plan. That's why Smarty won Best Value SIM-only network in the USwitch Mobile Awards 2020. Don't miss out. Search Smarty Mobile. Smarty. Simple, honest mobile. Smarty.co.uk.
Picture in your mind a stylish Audi with striking LED headlights, sporty alloy wheels, and some of our most advanced features, including a 10-inch digital cockpit and smart assistant systems like lane departure warning. Picture what that Audi looks like. Now think smaller. The Audi A1. It's not a small car, it's a small Audi. Visit audi.co.uk. Audi. Vorsprung durch Technik.
Get your cook on with Asda. Pick up a 7-pack of Growers Selection bananas for just £1 and 125 grams of Growers Selection blueberries. Was £1.19, now just £1. So you can get groovy with your smoothies. We've got loads more low prices across the store. Asda. Selected stores subject to availability.
While most of us are looking out for each other at this time, sadly, fraudsters are trying to take advantage of the situation. Here's Chris Ainsley from Santander with advice for keeping your money safe.
Please be wary of text messages containing links. They may appear to be from legitimate senders like the government, a bank or a delivery company, but never enter your online banking information or personal details after clicking on a link.
For more advice on keeping your money safe, visit santander.co.uk.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone. And becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Markets.
Coming up, we're going to talk with Tara LaChapelle of Bloomberg Opinion. She covers Berkshire Hathaway. We're going to get her takeaway on the annual meeting this weekend. Is Warren Buffett really as cautious as he sounds? Plus, Leland Miller, CEO of China Beige Book, our go-to source for all things China. We'll get his sense of where the Chinese economic recovery is. But first, let's go to Greg Jarrett of Bloomberg News for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
Stocks are lower, Paul. Industrial, financial, and real estate companies are the biggest losers in the S&P. Delta Airlines, American Airlines, and United Airlines all fell after Warren Buffett said over the weekend Berkshire Hathaway sold out of the four top U.S. airlines. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day. On Bloomberg Radio, S&P 500 is down 0.5%, down 15. Dow's down 1%, down 235. The NASDAQ is up 0.25%, up 21. The 10-year is down 9/32. The yield is 0.64%. West Texas Intermediate crude's up 1.2% at $20.02 a barrel. COMEX gold's up 0.9% at $17.1660 an ounce. The dollar yen is currently 107.01. The euro's $1.0910, and the British pound $1.2419. Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley economists say now there's evidence the world economy is starting to recover from the coronavirus and the restrictions placed on businesses and consumers. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
Warren Buffett of Berkshire Hathaway certainly set the tone when he came out and said he was a net seller of equity so far this year, exiting his stakes in the major U.S. airlines, saying that it was a changed game for them. Also talking about that cash pile. I mean, this has been really a big question. What will he do with the more than $130 billion in cash? Tara LaChapelle, Bloomberg Opinion columnist covering Berkshire Hathaway for years, and Warren Buffett. Can we first start talking about his tone? He seemed pretty somber, and he also normally does talk about the dynamism of the U.S. economy, and he got there, but did there seem like there was a little bit of a lack of conviction, Tara?
Yeah, I mean, I could see why today people are saying that, you know, he was a little bit pessimistic, but I think he was also just being realistic. I mean, he did start off the meeting with sort of a beautiful sermon about how America is going to get through this. And I think it's kind of what people needed to hear at that moment. It reminded me a little bit of like when we listened to Governor Cuomo, and you kind of leave there, you know, you feel a little bit down about some of the news, what we're hearing that's happening, but at the same time, there's like that little bit of hope. And that's what I got from Buffett. But he, you know, he isn't buying stocks. He isn't doing deals. And that does say a lot about what he thinks about this moment right now. I think a big piece of that is that the Fed has taken extraordinary actions to kind of prop up the markets, and that has eliminated some of that opportunity that you would normally expect Buffett to seize in a moment like this.
So, Tara, is there, I know you talk to a lot of Buffett watchers, and, you know, is there a sector of the economy, is there an industry that they would like to see him allocate some real capital? We're talking tens of billions of dollars, whether it's financials or consumer or energy.
I think it depends who you ask. You know, everyone I've talked to has had a different opinion on that. And I think maybe the only consensus is that they want to see Buffett spend that cash. And he kind of signaled that he's not really sure where to spend it right now, that even though he's still, you know, very much confident in America's future, you know, he's America's biggest cheerleader, that he thinks that this pandemic is going to change consumer behavior. And because of that, it's having him rethink what he thinks about some of these specific industries long term, like the airline industry, where he seemed to be all in and all of a sudden he has completely exited.
I'm struggling with the idea of the Fed backstop that he talked about. And I guess what I'm struggling with is the idea the Fed has propped up valuations of companies that might have otherwise been left for dead and forced to reach out to a Warren Buffett, where it would enable him to offer terms that would be beneficial to him and probably worse for these companies. What I'm struggling to understand is Warren Buffett's reluctance to lend to these companies a statement about their lack of viability, or is it a statement of just a lack of profitability with these loans that previously he would have enjoyed, say, in the 2008-2009 period? It's a difference.
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's hard to know his thinking, but my feeling coming out of that meeting and what he was saying was more the latter, that they're willing to do anything if the terms are right. You know, if they look at a business and they think that it's going to be around for a long time, even though it's going through a difficult period now, that they want to be all in on it, but it needs to be at a price that works for him, and he's very, very picky about that. You know, as the market went through this, period of a bunch of mega mergers and all these different companies making deals, Buffett sat on the sidelines because he said, even though there's a lot out there we would like to buy and not let these other companies get a hold of, we are not willing to pay certain valuations. And I guess right now it's a little bit different than the financial crisis, where he kind of had his, pickings, and right now he's saying, yeah, it looks like things are beaten down, but it was really temporary and nowhere near as deep as it was in 2008.
So, Tara, I pulled up the Berkshire Hathaway Series B shares, and over the last 5 years, they've certainly underperformed the S&P 500. What's the thinking within the Warren Buffett followers? Has he lost his touch? Is it just too big of a balance sheet? Is it his reluctance to kind of overweight tech? What's kind of some of the thinking there about Warren Buffett?
I think it's a little bit of all of that. I think people were a little confused by these tech investments and whether Todd and Ted, his other investment managers, see things the same way that Buffett does. But at the same time, everyone I talk to every year is just such a believer in Buffett and so trusting of what he does that they don't really question the stock price. Just like Buffett says, don't look at the stock price, look at their books.
Nope,
Did we lose Tara?
I think we lost Tara there. Yeah, it's interesting, Lisa. It's you could explain it away maybe by just saying, hey, if you look at the S&P, that's not really a great representation because it's really heavily weighted towards tech, and if you look at a broader index, maybe that's a better better way to compare it. But the fact is that the Berkshire Hathaway stock has underperformed the S&P 500, and you just got to wonder whether he's kind of lost the market a little bit in terms of outperformance.
Well, that's what a lot of people are saying. And even he said that he wasn't sure whether he could outperform the S&P going forward, and actually said that after he was gone, he's instructed his widow, his wife, to only invest in index funds. There was something that was sort of interesting that I found. I think that there's a broader point, though, about the Federal Reserve, and I think that this is interesting, and it's sort of unclear what the test will be. But if the Fed has managed to allow companies to stay alive on funding terms that are more attractive, that will be considered a real positive. If the Fed has pushed investors to lend to companies on unattractive terms for them on a risk-reward level, and then they still go bankrupt, that will be sort of another test and sort of when it becomes an insolvency crisis. And I think that that's sort of the threshold that's unclear right now, whether we're going to tip over.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, and that kind of goes to the underlying issue of how long will this virus be around? Will there be a second wave? Can economies reopen? Can they reopen efficiently, and how quickly? And that'll be obviously be a big impact on small and mid-sized businesses in particular. Right now, let's head down to Washington, D.C. for World and National Headlines with Nathan Hager. Nathan, what do you have for us?
Well, Paul, close to 250,000 people around the world have now died of the coronavirus. More than 67,000 of those are in the United States, but President Trump is warning of even more. He spoke at a virtual town hall at the Lincoln Memorial hosted by Fox News.
We're going to lose anywhere from 75, 80 to 100,000 people. That's a horrible thing. We shouldn't lose one person over this. This should have been stopped in China. It should have been stopped.
The president is promising a comprehensive report on the Chinese origins of the pandemic. In a speech at the University of Virginia's Miller Center for Politics, Deputy National Security Advisor Matt Pottinger said China's leaders risk a populist backlash if they don't let up on controls on critics like the doctor who sounded the first warnings about COVID-19. The Senate gets back to work today as negotiations continue over the next round of stimulus. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin says the Trump administration is prepared to back more funds for business, but it wants to see how state reopenings go first.
I think it's important we have a slow and steady. Some places will be faster, some places will be slower. I think, as you know, that this was no fault of business. This wasn't anybody making bad decisions. This was all about a virus that we're going to kill.
Mnuchin spoke on the Fox Business Network. Just getting word that the winningest coach in NFL history has died. The Miami Dolphins have announced Don Shula's death. Over a 33-year career with the Dolphins and the Baltimore Colts, Shula won a record 328 regular season games. That was 10 more than George Halas. Don Shula, dead today at the age of 90. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically. Yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at seic.com/seize change.
If knowledge is... Imagine winning 10 grand. Yes! With Set for Life, you could win 10 grand every month for 30 years. Get in! Amazing! Woo! Yes! Sweet! Unbelievable! Set for Life from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Play Monday online or on the app. Prize may be capped. Rules, procedures, and game-specific rules apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Hit the court anytime with these great NBA podcasts on TuneIn. The Low Post.
So what struck you about this potential head-to-head matchup? What did we learn now that Zion is involved and LeBron and Zion go at each other for the first time?
You know, I still think both teams have to figure out kind of who are their guys when they get into a fourth quarter. I think you saw that with both of them. There were some kind of odd moments.
The Ringer NBA Show.
Who ended up winning the thing. But I did watch for a little bit when it was DeAndre Ayton and Zach LaVine playing against each other. And then as the days went on, Devin Booker was involved. Tell me you've seen the clip of Devin Booker when I can't remember who his opponent was.
Or the Haber Show.
At the end, it's because I worked in the NBA in a front office, and when I was 14 years old, my family moved back from Sudan to America. I jumped high school here in New York
Find these and more NBA podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Want to relive the glory of college football?
Balls over a man, into the end zone.
Come explore TuneIn's classic game replay collection to hear ESPN's complete coverage of the 2019 New Year's 6 bowl games. Don't miss your chance to re-experience the Rose Bowl, the 2020 National Championship, featuring Clemson and LSU.
There's going to be 2 champions on the field tomorrow night. There's going to be 1 team hold up the trophy.
10, to the 5, touchdown! Search classic game replays to listen for free.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your 7th inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting 9 podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for a favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
Round the Bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike just to go over the first couple of picks, Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn. With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games.
Bergeron, he scores!
With game replay on TuneIn, you can listen to every power play, slap shot, and goal of the 2019-2020 season so far.
Suter to Cunningham to Fiala, he scores!
And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search Classic Game Replays to start listening. Get your daily dose of NFL shop talk with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Start your morning off right with Around the NFL.
Injured, depleted roster into the playoffs, and I didn't think they belonged in the playoffs.
I think overall, though, it was a great divisional round weekend because you got the first one.
Run into the end zone with the Move the Sticks podcast.
We had a fun little Zoom cocktail hour last night.
Oh, yeah.
What a star-studded affair. Greg, you were there for the earlier part, but it really popped off a little later on. We had Zach Goldman.
And dive deep into the sidelines with the Peter King podcast.
On the occasion of his 50th birthday, come down and record a little bit of retrospective on the life and times of Brett Lorenzo Favre.
That sounds like a bestseller.
It sounds like a precursor to a funeral. That's what it is.
I wasn't thinking that.
Explore these and more hard-hitting NFL podcasts right here on TuneIn.
News 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Stocks are down for day number 3 after the U.S. escalated rhetoric against China over the pandemic. Tech shares are mixed ahead of a busy week for earnings. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500's down 0.5%, down 13. Dow's down 0.9%, down 206. And the Nasdaq's up 0.3%, up 28. The 10-year is currently down 11/30 seconds with a yield of 0.64%. West Texas Intermediate crude's up 0.8% at $19.95 a barrel, with COMEX gold up 0.6% at $17.10 an ounce. The dollar yen 107 even. The euro $1.907, and the British pound $1.2422. Carnival Cruise Lines plans to resume sailing on August 1. Potentially ending the pause in operations that began after coronavirus outbreaks on several ships. The flagship brand of Carnival says it'll renew some cruises initially from Galveston, Miami, and Port Canaveral. Right now, Carnival is down 0.6%. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett. This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, China was the first to experience the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. It is now the first major economy starting to really come out of it on the other side, beginning to open up the economy gradually. The question is, are we seeing it in the economic numbers yet? Nobody better to discuss that than Leland Miller, CEO of the China Beige Book International, based in New York City. Leland, thanks so much for joining us once again. Give us a sense of, the lockdown appears to be ending in China. Is the economy ramping back up?
Well, so many of these terms have lost their meaning as, ramping back up, recovery. When you have an economy that's stopped and was shut down in February, things are going to get better. So you're going to see a recovery to some degree in March and April. The question is, what kind of recovery? Is this a recovery to earlier levels of growth? Is it a recovery to targeted levels of growth? We're not seeing anything like that. And the big story, I think, going forward, China will be able to get its bigger companies, its higher profile regions up by focused stimulus. How is the rest of the economy going to do, though? How is the private sector? How are SMEs? And this is what our focus really has been over the past month, looking deep into that data. And it's shown that the private sector has had a much more difficult job trying to get back up to speed than some of the more high profile and larger SOE type firms.
One thing that is so wonderful about the work that you do is you look on the ground. You don't necessarily look at the official data and sort of extrapolate out what that means in terms of the GDP and the growth rate in China. I'm looking right now. The estimate from economists surveyed by Bloomberg is that China will grow by 1.8% year over year. This is on a real GDP basis in 2020. Do you agree with that? Do you think that that's about accurate?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty good number. 2 months ago, I think this week, 2 months ago, the three of us had a conversation, and I said China might be at 2% growth, and everyone in the room laughed because it sounded so outlandish at that time.
Here we are.
But I think, look, here we are, and China may be on the top end of global growth and may be growing at just over zero. So, yeah, I think a realistic way to look at this is numbers that are barely in the positive area. We'll have to see how the U.S. and Europe recover or not in the third quarter, and particularly the fourth quarter, to be able to put a number on it. But I think numbers that are anything more than just a bit above zero are pretty optimistic at this point.
So, Leland, in the U.S., the economy, we become accustomed to recognizing that's really a consumer-driven economy. Maybe 70% of the U.S. economy is driven by the consumer. So if fiscal stimulus can really address the consumer, you can really kind of get the economy back moving again. Give us a sense of how that's maybe different in China.
Well, I think everybody is to some degree reliant on the consumer to play an important part of the bounce back. I think what you're seeing is sort of a multi-level strategy by Beijing, and everyone watching Beijing to put their own similar strategy. And you got to get manufacturing back up. You got to get the factories, people back in factories producing things, but you need orders for those factories. So you can get them up and running, but it doesn't mean they're going to do that well. And then when you look at services, okay, so you get services firms reopening, but are people ordering them? Are people buying from closed stores? The economy can be put up and start running again, and people are showing up for their jobs. But this is going to be a long period in which people are slowly getting more comfortable and doing more shopping outside and more traveling. So this is just a long area, and the consumer is not going to be an active part in this early on in this struggle.
I'm struggling also to understand the political backdrop as President Trump and Washington, D.C. more broadly ramps up pressure on China for a lack of transparency when it comes to the coronavirus and its spread, its origination. I'm wondering, how is this playing out in China? Do you have a sense of that?
Well, I think that there is a lot of rallying around the flag. I mean, certainly domestic surveys are showing that people are sticking with China in a very defensive, protective mode. But what China's been doing has been very dangerous for its global image. Instead of having come out after the coronavirus spread around the globe with this very quiet, goodwill approach, it was blaming something on Italy, blaming it on the U.S. military, blaming Africans for their part in this. It's been a very mismanaged approach, and so you're seeing the pushback on China right now with the desire for countries around the world to have an investigation into the origins of coronavirus. I think the one thing that China is actually being helped out by this is they're bunkering down, they're in protective mode, and I think people are rallying domestically under the idea that China is being attacked by the rest of the world. So this may be as ridiculous as it looks as a strategy, considering the whole world is getting mad at China right now. It may not be the worst domestic strategy if you get everybody on board, and it sort of shifts attention away from the party's role in messing up preparations early on or hiding the virus, and shifts attention from that.
So, Leland, kind of looking back just over the last several months, what did China do right in terms of its economy? Was there a big fiscal stimulus on the part of the Chinese central economy?
You've actually seen a much smaller stimulus so far than elsewhere around the globe. The first thing that was done is that there was an offering to provide credit to firms to just get by. But you saw something much larger in the United States, of course. And so this is, the expectation is that they're going to move from this provision of credit to keep things stable to some sort of large, heavy infrastructure build out. We have not seen that in our data. Our Q2 data is going to be coming out in a matter of weeks. And so we are going to be watching the property sector very closely. But I think the most interesting thing about China's response so far is that it hasn't been that big, particularly in comparison to what's going on in the United States and other countries. So I think that they're waiting to see how things pan out around the globe. And then when they're in build-out mode, you may see heavier stimulus. So you're seeing active credit spigots, but you're not yet seeing big, heavy stimulus. And that may be something we're going to see more of this summer or into the fall.
Do you think that that's leading to people overestimating how much the Chinese economy can recover?
think that's absolutely the case. I mean, look, you just watch the headlines every couple of weeks. Something they drop a point or half a point in GDP projections by the end of the year. The important story here is that this is not a China recovery story anymore. China is recovering to the extent it can, but in order for it to be up and running at full capacity, you need a recovery around the world. Now, that's not going to happen anytime soon. It may not happen at all in 2020. And so what they're going to need is sort of this rollout where they're providing stability to their businesses. They're avoiding widespread layoffs. They're avoiding widespread bankruptcies, and just keeping things going the best they can while the U.S. gets back online, while Europe gets back online, and how trade hopefully restarts, and you can slowly get things up from there.
Leland Miller, thank you so much, as always, for your insights. Leland Miller, Chief Executive Officer of China Beige Book International. With any growth rate above zero being a positive, that is my takeaway. And frankly, remember what he did say, 2%. GDP growth rate in China, and that seemed really low. Now the consensus is below that. I'm Lisa Abramowitz, along with Paul Sweeney from New York. This is Bloomberg Markets.
Business is like a puzzle. Can you make a call?
Imagine winning 10 grand. Yes! With Set for Life, you could win 10 grand every month for 30 years.
Get in! Amazing! Woo! Yes! Sweet! Unbelievable!
Set for Life from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Play Monday online or on the app. Prize may be capped. Rules, procedures, and game-specific rules apply. Players must be 16 or over.
This is an important message from the government. For now, we must all still stay at home. It can be hard, but it's making a difference. So please keep going for the ones you love. Keep going for every key worker on the front line as they keep going for us. Keep going because together we will beat the virus. To all of you making sacrifices every day, thank you. Stay home, protect the NHS, save lives.
Be part of the sports conversation with Sports Talk Radio on TuneIn. Join the discussion around your favorite local teams with sports stations broadcasting in your
The
area.
game will be 185 to 183, and somebody wins, whatever. Football, it's either full go or it's not. You got it's thud. I can practice what they call
Follow
thud.
national storylines and debates with ESPN Radio.
Does the NBA have a hiring problem when it comes to front office jobs in the leagues and a minority hiring issue? Stephen A. chimed in on that today on First Take.
It also resonates with me, Max. You can appreciate this position. One of the candidates was Brian Colangelo. We know what happened. I like Brian, but we know.
And hear what's happening worldwide with international channels like Talk Sport.
Seems as I'm sort of doing my life in reverse at the moment. I was on cricket tours when I was 20 years old, and now I'm 31. I'm sat at home injured playing PlayStation. So it's a tournament basically where you create your own character.
In your backyard and around the globe. Keep your finger on the pulse of the sports world with TuneIn.
Wondering what to play next? Want to know what other TuneIn listeners are listening to right now? Head to the trending section under Browse to explore the most popular stations and podcasts on TuneIn today. Millions of listeners like you can't be wrong.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney.
Are we on the brink of a more serious downturn?
I've always thought of the municipal bond market as a little bit of a safe haven.
Banks are going to have to start paying their depositors more.
Are we still in that mode where we're buying the dips?
Breaking market news and insight from Bloomberg experts.
Cash, if you're looking at treasury bills, provides a higher return than stocks and bonds here in the U.S.
If your consumer is a woman, you're more likely to be a growth company.
Longer-term interest rates can go down, even with short-term interest rates still going up a little bit.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Coming up, we're going to chat with Poonam Goyal from Bloomberg Intelligence on the J.Crew filing for bankruptcy. Is that just the first domino to fall in retail? Plus, Dr. William Madden, co-founder of Whole Brain Consulting, on why there's no need to panic over a meat shortage. But first, let's go to Greg Jarrett of Bloomberg News for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
Stocks fall, Paul, as U.S.-China tensions escalate over blame for the possible origin of the pandemic. The Trump administration stepped up assertions the new coronavirus originated at a lab in the Chinese city of Wuhan. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said over the weekend that he's seen enormous evidence for this. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500 is down 0.6%, down 18. The Dow is down over 1%, down 253. And the NASDAQ is currently up 0.2%, up 14. The 10-year is down 10, 30 seconds. The yield is 0.64%. West Texas Intermediate crude is up 0.4% at 1986 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.5% at 1709.50 an ounce. The dollar yen 106.90. The euro $1.917. The British pound $1.2421. First it was toilet paper. Now it's pork chops, wings, and hamburgers. Costco says it is limiting the number of beef, pork, and poultry products that customers can buy. Grocery stores are preparing for massive shortages following coronavirus-induced supply disruptions that have been reported. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Bloomberg Markets continues now with Paul and Lisa.
Thank you so much, Greg Jarrett. It is that time when we take a look at small and mid-cap shares. And just to put into perspective, there was a survey done by the Chamber of Commerce saying that more than 40% of the U.S.'s 30 million small businesses could close permanently in the next 6 months because of the pandemic. Dave Wilson, Bloomberg stocks editor, joining us now to talk, as he always does, about these smaller companies. Have the shares priced in this carnage, and are they poised to point up? So where are they trading today?
Well, as far as today goes, Lisa, smaller companies, bigger losses. The Russell 2000 index is down 1.1%, and the S&P 500 is lower by 0.6%. Just to put that into perspective, the Russell's now down more than 25% for the year. That's about twice as much as the S&P 500. Looking at today's declines, biggest drop in the index, the Russell that is, belongs to Front Yard Residential, whose ticker is RESI. The owner of rental homes has lost 24%. Amherst Holdings terminated a $2.3 billion deal to buy Front Yard. Pitney Bowes, ticker PBI, is down about 18%. The postage and shipping company's first quarter earnings missed the average analyst estimate in a Bloomberg survey. And Dave & Buster's, ticker Play, is down more than 17%. The operator of game centers and restaurants is raising cash by selling $100 million of shares through Jefferies. Now, the Russell's sharpest gain belongs to Stemline Therapeutics, ticker STML. The drug developer soared about 155% after agreeing to a $667 million takeover by Italy's Menarini Group. And Green Plains, ticker GPRE, has risen 8.8%. The maker of renewable fuels had a narrower first quarter loss than analysts expected.
Bloomberg stocks editor Dave Wilson, thank you so much for that. We appreciate that report on small caps. Well, some news came out this morning in the retail space. J. Crew filed for bankruptcy, felled by the pandemic, as well as a heavy debt load incurred from a previous leverage buyout. The question, I think, for many investors is simply, is this just the first domino to fall in the beleaguered retail space? To get a sense of where retail is going and how it's dealing with this pandemic, we welcome Poonam Goyal, Senior U.S. Retail Analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence. Poonam, thanks so much for joining us here. I guess this J. Crew news just kind of crystallizes for a lot of investors that, gee, the retail space has really been under a lot of stress over the past decade or so as more and more people shop online. Now you layer on top of that the pandemic. Will that be just too much for a lot of these retailers to bear? How do you kind of view kind of the developments in the retail space?
Sure. Thanks, Paul. So I think the question here really is, the retail space, as you said, has been under turmoil for the last decade. And what we're seeing now with the pandemic is retailers that were highly leveraged, that had a lot of debt, are finding it hard to see a path to recovery given the uncertainty that we face today. So I think what this just does is it accelerates essentially the fallout of retailers that do have a lot of debt coming due in a short period of time. So within the next 12 to 24 months, they really need to either see a path to be able to fulfill those debt obligations or seek some sort of protection, such as, Chapter 11 or bankruptcy.
Just to look at some numbers that came out from Fitch Ratings today. So J. Crew's bankruptcy pushes the 12-month trailing default rate for loans in the retail space to 9% from 7% at the end of April. And they predict that this default rate will reach 19% by year end. Neiman Marcus and JCPenney up next with expected insolvencies. I'm just wondering, Poonam, are they going to come out of bankruptcy? I mean, J. Crew would be staying open if it were open, but it's not open. It's a Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Are we going to continue to see these names, or is this the end of them?
I think you'll still see some of these names. For J. Crew, I read in the release that they were talking about keeping Madewell and J. Crew stores open once they can reopen for business. If you look back just at J. Crew, they've really suffered from product quality issues, from just being off par in terms of fashion in the last decade, or I'd say in the last few years, really. But in the third quarter, when they did report their last quarter, their sales at Madewell, same-store sales were up 10%, and J.Crew sales, namesake, were flat, and they did start to show some improvement. So the brand still has some equity. It's just with the debt that they have in place, it was hard for them to overcome that and really regrow the business. When you talk about someone like a JCPenney, the question is a lot bigger then, because it's a department store. Are department stores still relevant? I get that question all the time. Do they need to have the 800 plus stores that they have? So I think there's a lot more consolidation happening in that space than there is in a brand that, can relate and reconnect back with the customer.
So is the traditional retail mall, the enclosed mall, I'm thinking, is that really going to be at risk here? I know in the past there's been pressure on these malls, but it seems like it might even be more enhanced now post-pandemic.
Absolutely. With more than 1,000 enclosed malls, and with really, less than half of them being considered as centers that anyone would want to be in, AB plus centers as we call them, I think this would accelerate. So the closeout of these malls are really these malls morphing into other types of destinations. We've heard from the Gap and other retailers that as they look at the stores that they've closed, many of them may not reopen ever again. So as that starts to happen more broadly across the board at certain centers, you can argue that maybe these centers don't even reopen again in the same form.
Poonam Goyal, thank you so much for being with us. Poonam Goyal, Senior U.S. Retail Analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence. J.Crew being the first casualty, that's how it's being billed, the first casualty of the pandemic, although it definitely is forcing the hand of companies that already were over-leveraged and facing challenges with their business model, given the challenge to brick and mortar. I don't want to say the death of brick and mortar, but the challenge to brick and mortar in an era of Amazon. How about that New Jersey, the America Dream?
The Dream American Dream or something like that. Yeah. They were just about, or just at the stage, in some of the retail outlets. Initially they had opened some of the attractions and themes and things like that, but
the ski hill. Indoor ski hill.
Yeah, so I don't know what you do, because you take a look, it's just a huge complex, and I'm sure there's huge fixed operating costs to owning that property. And if you can't generate the revenue right when you just started, boy, that was a tough blow for that whole thing. And that's been a decade of just blow after blow against that whole property.
Although I will say, just to be a contrarian here, a lot of people itching to get out of their houses, especially if they have people under the age of a certain level. So I'm just suggesting that, if there are enough attractions, perhaps it's modeled in the right way that people will want to come out and take advantage of. But there's a question, again, how long will this go on? And can they continue to service the debts and get, without any revenue whatsoever at a time of great uncertainty? All these questions coming up. We're also going to be talking about the pork shortage and the meat issue that Greg Jarrett was talking about earlier. Right now, though, let's head down to our 99.1 studios in Washington, D.C. Nathan Hager there with world and national headlines. Nathan.
Lisa, we'll start with some breaking political news now. The Secretary of the Senate just said that her office cannot release any personnel records, and that would include a potential complaint that Tara Reid says she filed after Joe Biden allegedly sexually assaulted her in 1993. Biden is denying that claim. He asked the Senate Secretary to release any documentation when he issued that denial last Friday, but just now the Secretary's office said privacy laws prevent such disclosures. President Trump is turning up the rhetorical heat on China as the number of coronavirus cases around the world passes 3.5 million and deaths edge close to 250,000. President appeared at a virtual town hall last night hosted by Fox News.
We're going to be given a very strong report as to exactly what we think happened. And I think it'll be very conclusive.
The U.S. intelligence officials are looking into whether COVID-19 was released from a lab in Wuhan, China, by mistake. A senior Amazon engineer has resigned in solidarity with fired corporate and warehouse workers who protested working conditions at the company during the COVID-19 outbreak. Tim Bray was a vice president and engineer in Amazon's cloud division. In a blog post, he says he quit in dismay at Amazon firing whistleblowers. He says the decision will likely cost him more than $1 million in salary and unvested Amazon stock. And it's a day of firsts at the Supreme Court. First time the justices are hearing arguments over the phone. And and the first time we're all getting to hear it live. The pandemic forced this change for the 2-week session, though it's unclear whether this will mean more live streaming of high court arguments down the line. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
What began in China has expanded worldwide.
Is it China that's going to lead that consumer recovery?
What have we learned?
I'm curious as to what you're monitoring most closely in the news flow.
What can we predict?
Are you seeing a time when you can expect recovery in global travel?
Bloomberg Daybreak Asia.
Do people realize that those numbers are going to get a lot worse?
Tonight at 6 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Hi, I'm your host, Smokey Colbert, filling in for Smokey because after 75 years of...
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Turns out there's much more to say. Nearly 90% of wildfires are caused by us humans being careless, dumping our used barbecue coals willy-nilly. Guess the song was wrong. We did start the fire. That's why I respect Mother Nature and her trees, whether coniferous or new car scented. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies. Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
Melissa from Michigan. I work an extra part-time job serving lunch at my child's school, but I still can't afford to put food on our table.
Daniel from California. Choosing whether to pay the rent or pay to fix the car to get to work doesn't leave us with much at all. Now we can't even pay for meals.
Hunger is a story we can end. End it at feedingamerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
The market's in focus.
The pressure washer that means your patio is barbecue ready. The 4K projector that brings the thrill of the cinema to you. The yoga mat that turns your lounge into a studio. With a choice of ways to pay, you can make the most of your leisure time. You can say yes when it matters most at very.co.uk. Goods and services provided by Shop Direct Home Shopping Limited. Credit provided by Shop Direct Finance Company Limited.
This is a message from the government about the emergency measures to support the economy during the period of disruption caused by the coronavirus. To help you, your business, and your workers affected, you can apply for cash grants, business rate holidays, statutory sick pay relief packages, as well as the coronavirus job retention and self-employment income support schemes. For information, go to gov.uk/business-support now.
Picture in your mind a stylish Audi with striking LED headlights, sporty alloy wheels, and some of our most advanced features, including a 10-inch digital cockpit and smart assistant systems like lane departure warning. Picture what that Audi looks like. Now think smaller. The Audi A1. It's not a small car, it's a small Audi. Visit audi.co.uk. Audi. Vorsprung durch Technik.
Get your cook on with Asda. With Butcher Selection quarter pounder beef burgers, get a 4-pack for just £2.28. And salmon fillets, get a 2-pack for only £2.97. So dinner's always a winner. At Asda, we're committed to low prices every day on the quality products you need. Asda. Selected stores online, subject to availability.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone. And becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Typical Danny. Last night I was chilling with my girls, but ended up spilling my Chardonnay all over my fave lilac nightie when I saw the photo I was tagged in. State of my fake tan. But no worries, just one wash and my clothes will smell perf. with Surf. Surf gives you long-lasting fragrance with natural essential oils. Find your fragrance in Surf's laundry range.
TSB believe in people helping people. So if for whatever reason you become an innocent victim of fraud, they will refund every penny you lost from your TSB account. Find out more about their fraud refund guarantee at tsb.co.uk. Terms and conditions apply.
Max is dreaming of riding a giant chameleon whilst fighting a clan of ninjas. But in reality, he's helping fight COVID-19 in his sleep. Like thousands of others, he's joined the Dream Team. By using the Dream Lab app, they're helping scientists speed up the search for potential treatments.
I'll fight you.
You go, Max. Search Vodafone Dream Lab and join the Dream Team tonight.
Dreamlab app is owned by Vodafone Foundation, an independent charity. Registration number 1089625. Full terms at vodafone.co.uk/dreamlab.
Let's tune in sports on this day. On this day in 2002, Barry Bonds hits his 400th home run. The San Francisco Giant in a 3-0 win against Cincinnati, making Bonds the first player with 400 home runs for one team.
That ball is drilled to deep right, and that could be number 400. It is! He has become the first man in the history of the game.
To listen to conversations breaking down the moments just like this, search sports to be part of the discussion on TuneIn.
At Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Stocks are lower with industrial, financial, and real estate companies, the biggest losers in the S&P. Delta, American, and United fell after Warren Buffett said over the weekend Berkshire Hathaway sold out all of the four top U.S. airlines. Apple pushed the NASDAQ composite higher. We check those numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day here on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500 is currently down 0.5%, down 12. Dow's down 0.9%, down 209. And the NASDAQ, as we say, is up 0.4%, up 33, with Apple leading the way, currently up 0.6% at $290.92 per share. Let's take a look at the 10-year right now, down 8.30 seconds. The yield is 0.63%. West Texas Intermediate crude is up 0.3% at $19.85 a barrel, with COMEX gold up 0.7% at $17.12 even per ounce. The dollar yen stands at 106.91. The euro is $1.906. The British pound, $1.2419. The sources say Avis Budget Group has launched a junk bond sale today as the rental car company looks to raise cash to help it ride out the shutdown of the travel industry. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett. You're listening to Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
There's been a growing amount of fear in recent weeks about a shortage of pork and potentially beef as meat processing plants by a host of different companies close down in the wake of sicknesses of workers. We are so lucky to be joined by somebody who's specialized in the food processing and the food supply chain market, and that is William Madden, co-founder of Whole Brain Consulting in Chicago, Illinois, and Loveland, Colorado. Will, thank you so much for being with us. Can you just first give us a sense of what the fact is and what the fiction is in terms of how close we are to an actual meat shortage?
Thank you for having me. So there are what would be considered perceived shortages. What people need to take into account is that the U.S. is a top 3 exporter in every category of protein. So we have a lot of runway by curtailing exports, as well as restaurants. I mean, they're just not open. They're at, partial utilization rates that they were before. So there's a lot of capacity there. We could run into the risk if employees refuse to go to work and actually cause shutdowns. So that's where the real risk is.
All right, so Will, we've seen reports, heard reports about ranchers actually being forced to cull their herds, dairy farmers, throwing out milk, cracking eggs. I mean, how unusual is this, and is that not indicative of some kind of problem?
So the disposal of milk at the farm happened before COVID. So that isn't new. The cracking eggs, I'm sad to say, is a direct result and a lack of need. people ate a lot of eggs out of home, and they don't eat as many at home. I mean, think about how frequently you're having bacon and eggs at your house versus what you had when you were on the road or having breakfast out of the house. The cows, those are very expensive animals. They're also very expensive to feed. So with those plants shutting down and futures for products, especially hogs, decreasing, ranchers really have to look at how long they're going to hold those animals. Now, cows are a lot less likely than pigs to be euthanized just because of the expense and the time that it takes to raise one and the value of a cow.
Well, here's what I'm struggling with. Why is it that people are not consuming more eggs? I mean, I understand what you're saying, this idea that perhaps people eat them more frequently out than they do in their own homes. But is that true across the board when it comes to all produce and all fresh meats and vegetables? I mean, I'm just wondering, is this just a supply chain issue with respect to the farms and the factories that supplied restaurants in particular having to rejigger their supply chains and then ship off to grocery stores and places that are more focused on the retail? Or is this something about our eating habits during the pandemic?
So, like, let's take dairy, for instance. Most dairy was eaten out of home. Butter, ice cream, things of that nature. We're not eating those out of home, and we're not eating them at the frequency we would. Milk also has to be pasteurized before you can serve it to the general public, because raw milk is illegal in just about everywhere. So without having processing capabilities or certain need bases, there's no need for that milk. Therefore, it gets disposed of. As far as eating out, people just aren't doing it. You've seen a increased consumption at home 2x, but it's still not comparable the amount of food waste that we have when we eat out versus home. Think about it. You eat leftovers at home. Restaurants, you generally let them dispose of the food.
Oh, that makes sense. Will Madden, thanks so much for joining us. Will Madden's co-founder of Whole Brain Consulting, giving us some thoughts about, yes, there are some supply chain issues, but it doesn't appear, at least at this point, Lisa, that there is an impending shortage of beef and pork, despite some press reports over the last week or two.
But you want to know what? And actually, Al from New Jersey just messaged, and I got to say, I totally agree with him. This is exactly what I've been thinking about. Everyone's baking. I can't get flour. I mean, literally, I had to borrow flour to bake bread yesterday. People are baking more than in a generation. Eggs are needed for that. I know that personally, I'm having more eggs. I'm just wondering about, whether people's eating habits really are changing. And are people really eating less ice cream? I mean, God bless them. I don't know that that's the same in my household.
Yeah, I know. It's interesting, but it'll be interesting to see about the restaurants. You talk to a lot of people. I put myself in this camp. One of the things you do miss is going out to restaurants. But when and if the orders are lifted, will you go back to the same frequency? It's going to be very interesting to see how consumer behavior across a whole wide range of behaviors, whether it's, will you go back to a movie theater? Will you go back to a restaurant? Will you go on a cruise ship? Carnival is actually booking cruises starting, I think, August 1st. I saw them on the Bloomberg Terminal story. So, again, consumer behavior. I just don't know how things are going to change.
Do you eat eggs? Are you eating eggs at home?
Yeah.
Are you eating fewer or are you eating more eggs?
I'm going to say, at the very least, the same.
And what about ice cream?
Not a big ice cream eater.
Oh, all right. Well, we can discuss your dietary excitement afterwards. Coming up, we've got more diet tips from Bloomberg Markets. I'm Lisa Bromwitz and Paul Sweeney. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Stocks are falling after the U.S. escalated rhetoric against China over the coronavirus. Investors are worried that heightened tensions will lead to a reemergence of the trade war between the two nations. General Electric will cut about 1,300 jobs from its jet engine operations in the latest sign of the devastating impact of the outbreak on global air travel. The reductions will affect about 25% of GE Aviation's workers worldwide. Disruptions from the pandemic are so severe that Tyson Foods couldn't offer financial guidance for the year. Plant shutdowns and slowdowns are expected to continue. It will push up operating costs and reducing volumes for the remainder of fiscal 2020. And college students have a new extracurricular activity, and that's litigation. Undergraduates have sued more than 50 schools, demanding partial tuition, room and board, and fee refunds after they shut down. The suits could potentially involve billions of dollars in claims. Courtney Donahoe, Bloomberg Radio.
My mother was always very active and independent, and she was familiar with her neighborhood. But one day, she stopped at the stop sign for much longer than usual. She wasn't even really sure where she was at.
It's important for you to talk to someone about it. I felt so much better after my son told me, Mom, we'll figure it out.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/ourstories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
If knowledge is power, the Bloomberg Terminal is your power up, connecting you to real-time financial data, market-moving news, powerful analytics, and an influential network of financial decision makers around the world. Share ideas, negotiate trades, and gain the insight you need to make more informed decisions. See how the terminal can take your workflow to the next level at Bloomberg.com/professional.
Are you interested in a challenge?
The pressure washer that means your patio is barbecue ready. The 4K projector that brings the thrill of the cinema to you. The yoga mat that turns your lounge into a studio. With a choice of ways to pay, you can make the most of your leisure time. You can say yes when it matters most at very.co.uk. Goods and services provided by Shop Direct Home Shopping Limited. Credit provided by Shop Direct Finance Company Limited.
A half-price dream holiday, wouldn't want to miss that. A takeaway for free, wouldn't want to miss that. And 30 gigs data for just £10 a month on Smarty Mobile. You definitely don't want to miss that. Our Smarty SIM comes packed with 30 gigs of data and unlimited calls and texts for just £10 a month on a 1-month plan. That's why Smarty won Best Value SIM-only network in the Uswitch Mobile Awards 2020. Don't miss out. Search Smarty Mobile. Smarty. Simple, honest mobile. Smarty.co.uk.
Picture in your mind a stylish Audi with striking LED headlights, sporty alloy wheels, and some of our most advanced features, including a 10-inch digital cockpit and smart assistant systems like lane departure warning. Picture what that Audi looks like. Now think smaller. The Audi A1. It's not a small car, it's a small Audi. Visit audi.co.uk. Audi. Vorsprung durch Technik.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone. And becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Imagine winning 10 grand. Yes! With Set for Life, you could win 10 grand every month for 30 years.
Get in! Amazing! Woo! Yes! Sweet! Unbelievable!
Set for Life from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Play Monday online or on the app. Prize may be capped. Rules, procedures, and game-specific rules apply. Players must be 16 or over.
The Woj Pod with Adrian Wojnarowski.
Doris, you had reason to believe that you needed to get a test for the coronavirus.
Right. Well, let's just start with the headline, which is I did test positive for COVID-19. I was so tired from Saturday the 14th through Tuesday, March 17th. I kid you not, I could not be out of bed for 5 minutes without needing to go back to bed and lay down.
Search the Woj Pod to listen.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for a favorite baseball player.
active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
round the bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike, just to go over the first couple of picks, Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Markets.
Coming up, we are going to hear, just as Paul was saying, from Andrew Cuomo, governor of New York, on the latest on the coronavirus, plus a look at any progress being made on a possible vaccine. But right now, let's head over to Greg Jarrett, who gets his eggs and meat from a small local farm and was telling me all about it. And it sounds great. Thanks so much, Greg. I'm now really hungry.
It's delicious stuff, I've got to tell you. Meanwhile, Paul told us that stocks are down. I'm here to tell you this is the third day that stocks are down, if this holds. This after the U.S. escalated rhetoric against China over the coronavirus. Tech shares are mixed ahead of a busy week for earnings, and right now the NASDAQ is the only bright spot. We look at those numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500 is down 0.5%, down 13. The Dow is down 0.9%, down 220. And the NASDAQ is currently up 0.4%, up 34. The 10-year, let me take a look here. It's down 630 seconds. The yield is 0.63%. West Texas Intermediate Crude is reversed course. It's now down 0.7% at $19.63 a barrel. COMEX Gold is up 0.6% at $17.12 even per ounce. The dollar yen 106.87. The euro $1.915, and the British pound $1.2423. The U.S. Central Bank expects to begin purchasing shares of eligible exchange-traded funds early this month as part of its coronavirus emergency lending programs. This, according to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. Lending through the Fed's secondary market corporate credit facility and primary market corporate credit facility via purchases of corporate bonds will begin soon thereafter. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett. This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, in discussing a vaccine and the timing of a vaccine, the numbers we've heard from Dr. Fauci and others since the beginning of this has been 12 to 18 months at its best. Now, President Trump is talking about Operation Warp Speed that may deliver a vaccine by the end of this calendar year. To get a sense of kind of where we are on Operation Warp Speed, we welcome Max Neeson, Bloomberg opinion columnist covering all things healthcare. So, Max, is this Operational Warp Speed simply rhetoric? I mean, can something really be delivered by the end of this year?
If absolutely everything goes right and it goes faster than it ever has before in human history. So there are things that Operation Warp Speed can do. It can help, get manufacturing ready, build factories alongside these vaccines as they're being tested. So when one's ready, there will be doses available. That it can do. What it can't do is make these vaccines work or dramatically accelerate the time that these tests take beyond, some things it can do around the edges in terms of, better coordination, running big trials of multiple vaccines at once. So, we'll see what Warp Speed does on the things that it can affect, and that very well may be helpful, especially when it comes to the manufacturing question, which is one of the really big bottlenecks.
So you wrote a recent column basically saying they should engage in Operations Warp Speed and they should waste a lot of money doing so. Please explain.
Absolutely. So, in terms of the benefit, the value of having more vaccine ready sooner, it's basically incalculable for the economy as a whole. You hear a lot of talk about reopening and the potential economic benefits of that. None of that matters if people don't feel safe going out. So the only thing that's really going to get back to normal is vaccine. And in terms of wasting money, what I was talking about basically is what I mentioned before, building manufacturing capability for multiple vaccines before they've proven themselves. If you're going to wait all the way through the end of phase 3 testing to begin to build out serious hundreds of millions of doses worth of capacity, that just means you're going to end up having to wait months. And you're going to have to do it for multiple different candidates because all of these vaccines are quite different. Some of them are RNA vaccines. They use a newer approach, potentially faster, but also less proven. And then each of the different, more traditional vaccines, they all require their own factories. So in order to have a chance at having a lot of vaccine ready when you need it, you do have to build some capacity that will go to waste because not every one of these candidates will work.
So, Max, in the past, we talk about market incentives typically don't incentivize these big drug makers to go after these vaccines because if you do come up with a vaccine, the incentive from either government or just moral incentive is to give it away at cost or give it away, period, or, so you don't have a big economic incentive. Is that still the case here? And are companies just rushing forward because they feel like it's the right thing to do?
I think to a certain extent companies are doing that. The other part of the equation is via Warp Speed and then via some other efforts. The government is seeming like it's willing to take on some of the risk of financing these trials and of producing the vaccine, of building that really expensive manufacturing capacity. So that does lessen the burden on drug makers, although there's still very much room to build incentives in, not just for this round where we're...
I'm so sorry to do this. Max Neeson, Bloomberg Opinion Column. So unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there, and we will resume probably later in the week, if not tomorrow. Max Neeson, Bloomberg Opinion columnist covering all things healthcare. We now are turning to Andrew Cuomo, governor of New York, who just began speaking about the latest on the state of the coronavirus in the region.
State budget director. He doesn't smile much nowadays because the state budget is not in great shape. But when the federal government does the right thing and gives us funding, we expect that he's going to smile, that big smile again. It's a pleasure to be in Rochester with so many of my friends who have done such great work for the state. Former Lieutenant Governor Bob Duffy, who worked with me when we first got started and has done great work for the entire state of New York. Danny Wegman, pleasure to be with you. Wegmans is a great New York corporation, and Danny's a great civic leader, and they've been very helpful through this situation. Also, thank you for allowing us to do the antibody testing at Wegmans. That's been very, very helpful. And we thank you for everything you've done. And Nicole Wegman, thank you. Pleasure. Thank you for being on our New York Forward Advisory Board to help us going forward and find our way through this. Let's give you an update on where we are today. The total number of hospitalizations is down. You see that curve coming down. You see that mountain that we went up. Now we're on the other side of the mountain. You start to see the shape of the mountain. Unfortunately, the decline from the mountain is not as steep as the incline, right? And the big question for us in New York and every state across the nation has been how fast and how low does that decline go, right? How fast does the decline actually happen? And what is the lowest level that the decline will reach? Unfortunately, you see that we were hoping for a quick up plateau at the top, which is what they talked about, but a fast decline. You see the decline is again, not as steep as the incline. But it is a decline, and that's good news. The net change in total hospitalizations is down. Net change in intubations is down, and that's always good news. When a person is intubated, roughly 80% of the times there is not a good outcome. So the fact that the intubations is down is good news. And then the other end is how many new cases are coming in the door every day, how many new diagnoses in COVID cases. And that number is also declining. So not only are the number of people in hospitals coming down, but the number of new cases coming in the door is down. And that's good news because it had plateaued at about 900 statewide for a few days. But this number is down at 700, and that's a good number. I would take this with a grain of salt, as they say, because this is reporting from yesterday, which was a Sunday, and sometimes we get different results on the weekend. Remember, this whole reporting system is just been put in place. This never happened before. This is now every hospital in the state reporting every day for the first time. So it's a plus or minus across the board. This is the number that haunts me every day, and this number is not declining anywhere nearly as fast as we would like to see it decline. Still 226 New Yorkers who passed away, and so we don't become immune. We talk about these numbers. It's 226 families, right? That's 226 wives or brothers or sisters or children that are now suffering the loss of a loved one. So that we remember them in our thoughts and our prayers. People are all talking about reopening, which we should be talking about. This is not a sustainable situation. Close down everything. Close down the economy. Lock yourself in the home. You can do it for a short period of time, but you can't do it forever. But reopening is more difficult than the close down. The close down was relatively simple, right? You go into the basement, you throw the big power switch, and everything just goes down. Close the businesses, stay at home. It was a blunt operation, and one that was done all across the country. Just stop everything now. When you go to restart the reopening, now knowing what we know, it's more nuanced. You have to be more careful. And again, no one has done this before. No one has been here before. So first, start by learning the lessons that we did learn through this experience. And second, let's be smart about what we do. And I get the emotion, and I get the impatience, and I get the anxiety. We all feel it. When I say the situation is unsustainable, it's unsustainable on many levels. It's unsustainable economically. It's unsustainable personally. A lot of anxiety is now all through our community. We see it in increased alcoholism, increased substance abuse, increased domestic violence. So this is a very, very difficult period, and people want to move on, yes. But let's be smart about what we do, and let's learn the lessons. One of the lessons is we have never been here before, and we didn't really know what was going on. CDC releases a report end of last week that says the virus was actually coming to the East Coast from Europe. Everybody was looking at China for all those months. China, 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 China. Yeah. China was last November, December. The virus migrated from China while we were all staring at China and went to Europe. And the strain that came to the United States came from Europe. We had people in the airports stopping people from China, testing people from China. The federal government did a lot of testing, a lot of screening, people getting off planes from China. Yeah, but meanwhile, the people from Europe were walking right past them. And that's where the strain came from that was infecting this area. And that's what the CDC just learned last week. And this is going back to February, right, on one of the most studied topics ever. Again, just learn the lessons of what happened. You now add that piece of information on the Europe trips, and then you see the number of flights that came from Europe during that time, where they landed, and now it explains why you've seen the outbreak in Chicago that you've seen, why you've seen the number of cases in New York. Because yes, the flights were landing here, people were coming from Italy and UK and from European countries, and nobody thought to screen them. Nobody was on guard. And you add that to the density of New York, especially in New York City. And that virus just took off. Okay. We didn't know. Now we do. We also can look back in history. You look at that 1918 flu pandemic that they talk about. The places that opened too soon saw that flu come right back. And by the way, that flu was not one wave. That was 3 waves. First wave, second wave, third wave. Second wave was worse than the first wave. And you watch the other countries that went through this before us, right? We're not the first one down the chute. There were other countries that went down before us. You see, they wanted to reopen also. They were feeling the pressure on reopening. And you study those cases and you see that you reopen too soon or you reopen unintelligently, and you can then have an immediate backlash. And that's not speculation. That is looking at other countries and look at what has happened around the world. And then you talk to the experts who know. Listen to what they're saying. Dr. Fauci, who I think is one of the best voices and minds on this. Dr. Fauci has been through this in different iterations. He was one of the pioneers on the HIV virus and AIDS. And he says we could be in for a bad fall and a bad winter. Could be. Why? Because he doesn't know. He's not sure, but could be for a bad fall or bad winter. Okay, so put all of this in the equation. And then also acknowledge and actualize that the truth is that nobody knows what happens next and when it happens. Well, how can that be that nobody knows? We're so sophisticated. We have so much intelligence. We have so many experts. This is the United States of America. How can it be that no one knows? Because no one knows. I speak to the best experts globally, and nobody can tell you for sure. Now, experts, we look to experts and we expect them to know, so we push them to know. Answer the question, tell me when, what's going to happen in September, what's going to happen in December. Sometimes the answer is, I don't know. Sometimes that's the honest answer. I was talking to my daughters last night, and they said, you say at your briefings, I don't know. How can you say that? First, I'm not really sure they watch my briefings, but they're right. Sometimes I say, I don't know. Why? Because I don't know. And if you don't know, say you don't know. And I speak again to the best minds in this country, the best minds around the globe, and they don't know. So if you don't know, say you don't know. It doesn't mean you're not smart, no reason to get defensive. I don't know. When you know what you don't know and admit it, it will actually keep you safe. My daughters don't quite agree with this yet, but I haven't given up on the concept. Know what you don't know. Know when you don't know what the future holds. You can be safe because then you can prepare for different possibilities. And that's where we are. We don't know, but we will be prepared for all possibilities. So, reopening, chart a course with the best information you have, learning from the lessons you have, but be able to correct that course depending on what happens. Which means don't act emotionally, don't act because I feel this, I feel that, because someone said, well, other states are opening, so you must be able to open if other states are opening. Forget the anecdotal, forget the atmospheric, forget the environmental, forget the emotional. Look at the data, look at the measurements, look at the science, follow the facts. And that's what we've done here from day one. This is no gut instinct. This is look at the data, look at the science, look at the metrics. Move forward, measuring what you can and what you know, and then be prepared to adjust. Well, I want specificity. I want to know for sure. You don't. But there's liberation in knowing that. So let's do this intelligently based on metrics, and we'll see what happens, and we'll adjust to whatever happens. Well, what does that mean on metrics? You can measure this, and we have to measure this. You look at that percentage and the rate of hospitalizations, which we have, right? That's the chart that goes up and down. You watch that hospitalization rate. Do your diagnostic testing so you know how many people are testing positive, and you can watch that rate going up or down or flat. Do the contact tracing. So after the testing, you follow up and you do that contact tracing. And you are then reducing the infection spread by isolating the positives. If you do those things, you will control the rate of transmission of the virus, which is everything. Nobody says you're going to eliminate the virus in the short term. Nobody. But you can control the rate of transmission. And if you can control the rate of transmission, you can control the rate of transmission from becoming an outbreak or an epidemic or overwhelming your public health system. That is the best you can do. So control the rate of transmission to what they call 1.1 or less. 1.1 is every person infects 1.1 other people, more than one other person. If you're doing that, that is an outbreak. That means it's going to increase exponentially and it's going to be out of control. As long as your rate of transmission is manageable and low, then reopen your businesses. And reopen the businesses in phases, so you're increasing that activity level while you're watching the rate of transmission. Rate of transmission goes up, stop the reopening. Close the valve right away. So reopen businesses, do it in phases, and watch that rate of transmission. It gets over 1.1, stop everything immediately. That's where the other countries wound up. They started to reopen, they exceeded the 1.1, it became an outbreak again, they had to slow down. Rather than starting and stopping, you'd rather have a controlled start so you don't have to stop, right? And that's what you learn from the other countries. You reopen too fast, then you have to stop. And nobody wants to have gone through all of this and then start just to stop again. Well, how does that happen? First of all, it's not going to happen statewide. This state has different regions which are in much different situations than other regions in the state. And rather than wait for the whole state to be ready, reopen on a regional basis. If upstate has to wait for downstate to be ready, they're going to be waiting a long time. So analyze the situation on a regional basis, okay? And you look at a region on 4 measures: the number of new infections, your healthcare capacity. If the infections goes too high, you overwhelm your health system. Now you're Italy with people on gurneys in a hallway because your hospital system can't handle it. Do your diagnostic testing so you're seeing how the infection is increasing or decreasing. And do the contact tracing, have that system in place so when you test and you find a positive, you trace the contacts from that positive person and you're isolating them to bring down the rate. And you do that on a regional basis. That system has to be in place for a regional basis. How do you start? When can I start reopening? We look at guidelines from the CDC, which say a region has to have at least 14 days of decline in total hospitalizations and death on a 3-day rolling average. So you take a 3-day average, you have to have 14 days of decline. You can't have more than 15 new total cases or 5 new deaths on a 3-day rolling average. This is telling you that you're basically at a plateau level that you can actually start to reopen. then you're watching the rate of infection and the spread of the infection. And the benchmark there is fewer than 2 new COVID patients per 100,000 residents, right? It's based on your population to account for the variance in the different sizes of regions across the state. Then anticipate, protect yourself from all possibilities. Well, what if we have a surge again? Never fill your hospitals to more than 70% capacity. Leave 30% in case you have a surge. Remember, this virus is tricky. The rate of infection, a person who gets infected today shows up in the hospital 10 days from today or 2 weeks from today. So that infection rate goes up. You don't feel it for 2 weeks. There's a lag to it. You want to make sure you have 30% of the hospital beds available in case you have that surge. Also, learn the lessons from before. Every hospital has to have 90 days of PPE for that hospital at the rate that they have been using it during COVID. We cannot have another mad scramble where nurses and doctors don't have gowns and masks, etc., because the hospitals don't have the necessary stockpile. So make sure every hospital has the stockpile. On the testing, we have done really remarkable work on testing. 1 million New Yorkers have now been tested, believe it or not. And the CDC Coronavirus Task Force for the White House recommends that for a region to reopen, you have 30 tests for every 1,000 residents ready to go. So what testing capacity do we need for a region to reopen? You have to be prepared to do 30 tests for every 1,000 residents. New York is doing more tests than any country in the state, by far. New York is doing more tests than any country on the globe per capita. So we're way ahead in testing, but it doesn't matter what we're doing statewide. To open a region, that region has to have a testing capacity of 30 per 1,000. The National Guard has been doing a great job for us in putting together testing kits and distributing testing kits, and we want to thank them very much. But we have to have those tests, and we have to have what they call tracers, contact tracers in place. And Mayor Bloomberg has been very helpful, former mayor of New York City, in putting together this tracing system. This has never existed before on this scale. A group of people who literally trace contacts from a person who's positive. Who did you have dinner with last night? Who did you have dinner with 2 nights ago? Who might you have been in contact with? And then contacting those people to say, do you have any symptoms? If you do, you should know. You were with John Smith. John Smith tested positive. He said he went to dinner with you. You should be on alert. That whole tracing system has never been done, not only in this state, but in this country. So that all has to be set up, and it has to be done. Once that is all done, then you can talk about reopening businesses. Well, which businesses do we open first? You open businesses first that are most essential and pose the lowest risk, okay? Most essential and the lowest risk. Phase 1, we're talking about construction, manufacturing, and select retail with curbside pickup. They are the most essential with the lowest risk. Second phase, professional services, retail, administrative support, real estate. Third phase, restaurant, food services, accommodation. Fourth, arts, entertainment, recreation, education. Remember, density is not your friend here. Large gatherings are not your friend. That's where the virus tends to spread. That's why those situations would be down at the end. And then we need businesses to also reimagine how they're going to do business and get ready to protect their workforce, to change their physical environment to the extent they need to, and to change their processes to make sure people can socially distance, people remain at a safe, in a safe environment. And that's going to be up to businesses to come up with ways to reconfigure their workplace and their processes to make this work. And that's business by business. Government can say these are the standards, but a business is going to have to figure out how to do that. When you look at this state, there are some regions that right now, by the numbers, pose a lower risk, some that pose a higher risk. We can tell you by region right now of those criteria that we went through, which ones are in place for which region. So which ones have the right hospitalization, the right testing regimen, the right contact tracing regimen, and which ones still have work to do in those areas. And this is going to be region by region. And each region has to put together the leaders in those respective areas who put together this system and monitor this system literally on a daily basis. So they're getting all that input, all those specifics, all that data, and then day by day, they're making a decision as to how to proceed with reopening based on the data, based on the facts. And that'll be a little different for every region in the state. May 15th is when the statewide pause order, P-A-U-S-E, not P-A-W-S, the pause order was stop all businesses, stay at home. That expires on May 15th. May 15th, regions can start to reopen and do their own analysis.
We've been listening to New York Mayor Andrew Cuomo giving his daily press briefing. The usual statistics, again, trending positively, but really focusing this day on kind of the metrics that he and the state will use to reopen New York State. Right now, let's go across the river to New Jersey. Governor Phil Murphy, governor of New Jersey, is giving his daily press briefing. Let's listen in.
Security and preparedness. Thank you, sir, for being here, and I'm sure Matt Placken, Chief Counsel, will be here in a bit. Before we get to the numbers, today that we are announcing that all New Jersey school buildings will remain closed for in-person instruction for the remainder of the 2019-2020 school year, and that all students and faculty will continue with remote learning. Private schools with longer academic years will remain closed until at least June 30. We reached this decision after much consideration with Commissioner Repillette in the Department of Education, district officials across the state, and multiple stakeholders, including both educators and parents. We reached this conclusion based on the guidance from our public health experts and with a single goal in mind: the safety and well-being of our children and of our educators, administrators, and staff. This has been an inclusive and rigorous process involving people with a wide range of experiences and perspectives. And because of this process, we've been able to reach this conclusion 11 days in advance of the deadline I had previously set. We wanted you to know when we did and to provide certainty. I had hoped that we could get back to a sense of normal by allowing our children to return to the schools they love and to be with their friends and classmates. But the reality is that we cannot safely reopen our schools to provide students and families or faculty and staff the confidence needed to allow for a return to in-person instruction. As such, the executive order I signed on March 16th, which closed our schools indefinitely, remains in effect. As I have noted before, we are working with the principle that public health creates economic health, or in this case, public health creates educational health. If the standards to reopen our workplaces are high, they are even higher when it comes to schools filled with our most precious assets, our children. We simply could not find a way to reconcile that core principle and open our school buildings at this time. The hurdles, logistical, educational, and most of all, practical, that would have allowed students and faculty to return, even for a short while, could not be overcome. We could not guarantee an environment that would not only be safe, but fully capable of meeting the educational needs of students in a setting built for social distancing. So we are directing all district, charter, Renaissance, county, VOTEC, private, and other school leaders to update their preparedness plans to ensure the continuation of remote learning. As the father of a high schooler who has been attending classes remotely for nearly 2 months, with his siblings, by the way, 3 of them in college doing the same, I understand the concerns of both parents and school leaders. I understand those concerns, even if I always don't understand the assignments. I think a lot of us are in that boat. And I also fully appreciate the disappointment that our kids won't be closing the school year among their friends. But for us to ensure that we can undertake a responsible restart and recovery, this step was necessary. I must note that this decision only applies to the remainder of the 2019-2020 regular academic year. The department will be leading stakeholder meetings alongside district leaders, educators, local officials, and parent organizations to determine whether summer educational or enrichment or other programs offered at our schools may proceed. And when we make a final determination on those programs, we will certainly announce it. Additionally, the department will be conducting the same rigorous work and stakeholder engagement regarding the opening of our buildings for the 2020-2021 school year in September. There is a lot to consider about how the school day may differ once our students and faculty return. Throughout all of these issues, we are keenly focused on issues of equity. Where sports are concerned, we are leaning on the guidance from the New Jersey State Interscholastic Athletic Association against the resumption of spring sports for the remainder of the 2019-2020 school year as well. The NJSIAA Medical Board has concluded that due to a lack of testing, viable treatments, and a vaccine, that spring sports were not a viable option. I know the NJSIAA took no pleasure in reaching that conclusion, and frankly, neither do I in stating it. And this decision, I know, goes beyond just considerations of safety given COVID-19, but also to the overall physical health and safety of our student athletes. I also know that our graduating seniors were looking forward to their proms and walking across the stage to receive their diplomas in front of their families and friends. I still want to see them have those opportunities, and we will also work with districts on safe and creative ways to give the class of 2020 a proper send-off to their bright futures. I want to thank every parent, grandparent, or guardian who has been juggling everything else in their life on top of being their child's at-home educator. I know it hasn't been easy, but I also know that you have been extraordinary. And I thank our educators, staff, and administrators, the best in the United States of America, who have performed heroically with little time to prepare for this uncharted path. You continually prove why New Jersey has the best public schools in the United States of America. We can also announce that the department has already applied for $310 million in federal assistance for our schools, which we are entitled to, and of which at least roughly $280 million would flow to our schools to help them cover the costs of purchasing educational technology, cleaning and sanitizing their buildings, and ensuring support services for students who require them, among other costs. I know Commissioner Repillette will have more to say on this. But to every student, we want you to be safe. We want you to be healthy. We want you to continue your educational journey wherever it takes you. And to ensure all of these things, we have to take this step. Additionally, today I am signing an executive order that lays bare the severity of the financial crisis we face because of COVID-19, from both plummeting state revenues due to the near total shutdown of our economy and the skyrocketing costs of fighting this pandemic. I am rescinding the executive order I signed on June 30th, 2019, which directed State Treasurer Liz Moya to achieve a $1.276 billion surplus by the end of this current fiscal year. Absent significant outside assistance, this is no longer feasible. No administration, and I mean no one, has been as committed to restoring our state's fiscal foundation than ours. We have spent the past 2+ years working nonstop to build surpluses and put money aside for a rainy day. We've reduced reliance on one-shots to historic lows and have made unprecedented pension contributions while working in partnership with our public workers to reduce health care costs for 2 consecutive years. At the same time, we've made significant new investments in our schools, in direct property tax relief, in mass transit, and in any number of vital programs that serve millions of New Jerseyans each and every day. But right now, it's pouring. We are on the brink of having to make very tough and, quite frankly, very unpalatable decisions regarding each of these areas and more. And we need to have these funds as a safeguard should direct federal assistance to our state fail to surface. And today, I will also be vetoing numerous bills the legislature sent to my desk to appropriate money to any number of causes and programs. I don't want to veto them, but given our current fiscal situation, I have no other choice. These discussions aren't just happening here in New Jersey either. They're happening across the nation. We need the federal government to step forward with significant investment in our states, both red and blue, to prevent our recovery from being held back because we cannot fund it. Every governor shut his or her state's economy to combat COVID-19. We all will feel the devastating impact of this necessary but costly action. Across the country, cuts to critical services are inevitable, and bankruptcy is not an option. This is not about legacy fiscal issues either. We will continue our efforts to right our financial house as we have been doing. Nor is this a bailout. This is about keeping our police and firefighters, our EMTs and paramedics, and our public health workers, our educators, and the hardworking folks processing a mountain of unemployment claims, among so many others, on the job and working to get us through this. A fiscal disaster is not months away. These decisions will be on our doorstep in literally just a few weeks. Congress needs to act, and act now. I will continue to work as I have with anyone from either side of the aisle and at every level to get this done for the people of New Jersey. But even if Congress delivers, it won't be enough. We will still need to borrow on a short-term basis to bridge our immediate cash flow needs. For weeks, I have been working collaboratively with the legislature to provide our administration this authority, and I ask them today, and I ask you to ask them today to pass this legislation swiftly so our frontline responders can breathe a little easier. Even Warren Buffett said this weekend, this is a good time to borrow money. Let's get this done. Now let's look at the overnight numbers. And by the way, I believe right up front these numbers are suspect, and I wish I could say they weren't, Judy, but I believe they are. We're announcing an additional 1,621 positive test results for a statewide total of 128,269. Again, the number of new cases may be low as a result of a network outage that we had yesterday that may have prevented all cases from being processed. I hope history will prove me wrong on this, but I believe that is the case. This may also be true, sadly, for the reporting of new deaths, as we will see in a minute. Here is the graph which shows new case numbers, and even with today's likely incomplete count, we see where we still need to push down the curve. The map, which we show you regularly, of New Jersey, we have turned to, as most days, continues to get lighter and lighter as the rate of doubling of new cases continues to slow. Again, we've only got one county left in the orange. And again, those numbers in the south are a lot smaller than the ones in the north. But the progress in both north, central, and south is unmistakable. We will be carefully reviewing these charts and maps over the coming days to see if the reopening of our parks was successful. But I want to thank the overwhelming number of you who did the right thing and took all of our asks and precautions to heart. I know many of our parks filled up early in the day, and I don't blame you one bit for wanting to get out. My wife and I went for a run yesterday. I want to give Monmouth County a shout out in Thompson Park in Middletown. They had the place set up exactly as the doctor ordered. Folks did not congregate. It was generally a very, very positive experience. The only exception, and I want to hit this point again hard, not enough masks. I'd say probably 80 or 90% of the folks were not wearing masks. That's something that we have to continue to pound upon. But again, the county had set it up, and we heard stories like this up and down the state. Pat can give you, and we'll give you the compliance report. More importantly, we heard very few incidents of knucklehead behavior that would require me to reverse course and close them again. So to all of you, thank you for helping us pass this important test. And again, Pat will give a better sense of compliance in a few minutes. As of last night's reporting, 5,287 patients with COVID-19 were being treated in our hospitals. This is a drop, by the way, of about 1,000 in just 5 days. And let's look at the regions. Across every region of the state, we continue to see the overall stresses lessening in our healthcare system. Again, even in the South, which is seeing some flattening, the numbers on the chart will show you that the overall numbers are lower than they are in the central and the northern part. But even now, that curve is beginning to flatten. Our field medical stations reported 41 patients. There were 1,610 patients in either critical or intensive care, and this number too has decreased every day for the past 6 days. Ventilator use currently stands at 1,189, the lowest it's been, Judy, I think in over a month. There were 362 new hospitalizations yesterday, and on discharges, 335 live patients were released from our hospitals yesterday. Our hospitals continue to show the positive trends we want and need to see if we are to get ourselves in a steady position to get on the road back and toward the responsible restart of our economy. These numbers are beginning to become the underpinnings of our overarching ideals that public health creates economic health and that data determines dates. Unfortunately, even with these positive trends we are seeing, we continue to lose too many residents to COVID-19. And with the heaviest of hearts, we report 45 additional deaths from among our New Jersey family. Again, however, this number is likely lower as a result of the network outage we had yesterday. But either way, there are 45 precious lives. Our statewide total is 7,910. COVID-19 doesn't care who it takes. Our losses mirror our diversity. And today we remember 3 more who have been taken from our New Jersey family. This is Michael Connors Sr. He had 3 loves: family, cars, and work. At first, his love of cars led to a career as an auto mechanic in Newark. But while there, he made numerous friends within the Newark Police Department, and with their encouragement, he ultimately joined their ranks in 1993. He proudly served the people of Newark as a police officer for 26 years. COVID-19 claimed him just this past Thursday, and Michael was only 58. His family says he'll be forever remembered for his work ethic, dedication, wit, and fun-loving presence. Michael leaves his daughter Dorothy, with whom I had the honor of speaking yesterday afternoon, 2 sons, Michael Jr. and Damien, his adopted daughter Samia, as well as 7 grandchildren and a committed companion, Tiffany Parham, and many other relatives and friends. On behalf of our state, we thank him for his selfless service, and we keep the whole Connors family and his memory in our prayers. Luis Fernando Marulanda. There he is. He came to the United States from Colombia in Medellin when he was 22 years old. He lived in Secaucus and was a long-time employee of NJ Transit and New York Waterway before that, taking pride in his work and in helping get people to where they needed to go. And he was one of those who helped.
You have been listening to New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy with his COVID-19 update for Monday, May 4th. Says no school or activities definitely this spring or summer, and in any event, school will look much different if and when it starts next year. Says there will be safe and creative ways for seniors to celebrate their graduation. He's asking for federal assistance. He says the state is in dire financial straits. Now let's join Charlie Baker of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts with his daily COVID-19 update.
For certain parts of our population, it has now been documented that a very significant portion of the people who actually contract this virus will never show symptoms at all. And because of that, because such a large number of people who are in fact carriers and therefore contagious can transmit this virus to others without knowing that they're doing it because they show no signs and symptoms that they have it, that face covering is as much about protecting other people from you as it is about protecting you from other people. And I can't stress that one enough. Right now, we're going to continue to do everything we can to continue to stop the spread, follow the data with respect to what it tells us about what we can do with regard to reopening when the time gets there, and make sure that we do this in a correct, planned, and appropriate way. Now I want to turn the podium over to the Lieutenant Governor.
Thank you, Gov.
You have been listening to Charlie Baker now, first New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy and then Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker. At this point in time, we're going to return to our programming in progress. That is Balance of Power with David Weston.
And whether it comes out that it's one of these sort of front runners or a dark horse who makes a leap forward soon, we don't know. But it surely will be someone who will help him with his campaign and election come November, and I think that'll be the number one decisiveness is who's going to help him win the most.
Right. Rick, thank you so much for joining us. That's Rick Davis. He's, among other things, Bloomberg political contributor, I'm delighted to say. Coming up next here, we're going to have Stock of the Hour. Tyson's, the food processor, which is struggling with the pandemic. That's coming up next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
Imagine being denied.
Prince of Darkness here.
Let's rock and roll.
Blaze is taking British rock legend Ozzy Osbourne and his son Jack on a road trip of the USA.
What?
It's him and I, the open road, father and son, in an RV. Ready?
I'm ready. I feel like the king. It's what you call touring, son.
Ozzy and Jack's American road trip starts Tuesday the 5th of May at 9 on Blaze. Take it on. Freeview Channel 63.
This is a message from the government about the emergency measures to support the economy during the period of disruption caused by the coronavirus. To help you, your business, and your workers affected, you can apply for cash grants, business rate holidays, statutory sick pay relief packages, as well as the coronavirus job retention and self-employment income support schemes. For information, go to gov.uk/business-support now.
The pressure washer that means your patio is barbecue ready. The 4K projector that brings the thrill of the cinema to you. The yoga mat that turns your lounge into a studio. With a choice of ways to pay, you can make the most of your leisure time. You can say yes when it matters most at very.co.uk. Goods and services provided by Shop Direct Home Shopping Limited. Credit provided by Shop Direct Finance Company Limited.
A half-price dream holiday, wouldn't want to miss that. A takeaway for free, wouldn't want to miss that. And 30 gigs data for just £10 a month on Smarty Mobile. You definitely don't want to miss that. Our Smarty SIM comes packed with 30 gigs of data and unlimited calls and texts for just £10 a month on a 1-month plan. That's why Smarty won Best Value SIM-only network in the U-Switch Mobile Awards 2020. Don't miss out. Search Smarty Mobile. Smarty. Simple, honest mobile. Smarty.co.uk.
Welcome back to Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. It's time now for Stock of the Hour. It is Tyson's. Well, consumers were really stocking up on meat and putting it in their freezer in anticipation of the pandemic, but Tyson's had to spend an awful lot of money to keep those plants open and to keep their workers safe. Here for more is Abigail Doolittle.
Well, it has certainly been a very difficult situation this year for these protein companies. Lots of headlines in the news recently about shortages around food, mainly because these plants, these slaughterhouses, there have been widespread cases of COVID-19. So the companies have really struggled as to whether or not to keep the plants open or to close them to protect their workers, perhaps the food supply as well, but more so their workers. As a result, you have less volume going out and you have higher input costs because they are compensating at this point some of their workers to a greater degree. That means gross margins going in the wrong direction, David. They are going down. They said that the second quarter is going to be worse than expected, and they pulled the full year outlook because of all of this. They're just not sure how quickly they'll be able to get some of these plants back online, David.
Abigail, is this representative, do we know, of the meat and the food processing business more generally, or is it more specific to Tyson?
No, it certainly is. It's a widespread trend for some of these other companies, too. Some of the more poultry-related companies, such as Sanderson, an egg company, along with Pilgrim's Pride. So lots of difficulties here as these companies struggle, again, to keep their workers safe relative. Tyson, the bulk of their business is beef and then it's poultry, and they're now talking about the possibility of near-term outages in food retail. But the bigger point here, David, is actually goes to restaurants. That's about 40% of their revenue. And relative to the meat industry overall, for those workers, it's brutal under the best conditions. These workers are very close together as these animals go through. Perhaps one lesson to come out of the crisis, David, could be the idea that a $1 hamburger in the present day is just not feasible. It'd be interesting to see that as this situation goes on, David.
Indeed. Thank you so very much to Abigail Doolittle for that stock of the hour. Coming up here on Balance of Power, we're going to get to hear from the CEO of Raymond James Financial about his thoughts on credit and what is going on with the banking industry. That's going up next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. U.S. stocks are mostly lower thanks to heightened tensions between the U.S. and China about the origins of the coronavirus. The Dow is dropping 200 points, S&P down 10, but the Nasdaq is up 49 points. Airline stocks are down after billionaire investor Warren Buffett sold his stake in the 4 biggest airlines over the weekend. But Clorox is cleaning up. The stock has risen 25% so far this year. Well, when passengers can't or won't fly, the airlines cut flights, drop orders for new jets, and cut jobs. General Electric is slashing 13,000 jobs in its aviation division. And Carnival Cruise announced it plans to resume sailing on August 1st. It will start with cruises from 3 ports in Florida and Texas. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Hi, we're the Goo Goo Dolls. We're fortunate that our daughters have what they need to grow and learn. But that isn't the case for nearly 13 million kids in the U.S. that struggle with hunger.
Childhood hunger, a heartbreaking reality that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and provides it to families and children in need.
You can help kids in need in your community by visiting feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Market upheavals.
The narrative is driven by uncertainty about the virus.
Political reversals.
It's not clear that some of the Republicans up on the Hill are agreed with the Republican White House.
Economic shifts.
The macro clearly being driven by the coronavirus outbreak.
Everything seems to be in motion.
Will it also mean a global recession in your view now?
But here, you're on solid ground.
Looking forward to guiding you through all of this.
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Welcome
Welcome to Bloomberg Balance of Power. I'm Shanali Bassick. Joining me now is Paul Riley, the CEO of Raymond James from St. Petersburg, Florida. At Raymond James, they actually saw record increases when it came to cash balances. And that draws me to wonder, Paul, why are your clients all behaving a lot like Warren Buffett here? And why is it that they are hoarding cash? Do they not see opportunities to put this money to work?
Well, first of all, great to be with you, even though remotely. I think a lot of the clients, most of them have held in equities. I think a lot of people that went to cash went from fixed income, kind of near cash instruments, and converted it into pure cash, both for liquidity and also because of government insurance, really, in these cash accounts that they can get that they can't get in money market types of funds.
Well, speaking of government insurance here, something interesting about your clients' base is that this is private clients. This tends to lean a little wealthier. If they're not putting money to work in this economy, how are we supposed to get the economy to kickstart?
Yeah, I think there's an awful lot of wait and see. And as you know, the whole virus and what return to work is going to look like leaves a lot of uncertainty. So, you know, people fall into two camps. That as we gradually open up now, if the consumer comes back and the opening up goes without flaws and people get back to work and start earning money and spending money, the economy will start recovering. If that doesn't happen, many businesses won't make it that are on the edge, or if it goes into a second wave and there's another close down, it'll be devastating for businesses. And so many people are keeping liquid, waiting for that event to buy or to invest through the second cycle, or to get comfortable enough that the cycle is going to continue to be positive and they can invest. So. And you can see that in the markets as they go. 2 weeks ago is a bad week. Last week's a good week. You know, April was a good month. We open up, tough today. So people are just very, very uncertain as what this recovery is going to look like.
Well, given this uncertainty, you mentioned the term government insurance when it came to cash balances, to deposits. People can feel comfortable with the money they put away in the safe. But what would it take for them to start investing again?
Again, I think people are waiting for a recovery sign that we're in a recovery, that there's so many businesses affected by COVID, from big businesses to little businesses. And the question is, even with a lot of the government programs, which have been great at keeping businesses open, most of those programs were 2-month programs or 3 months programs, really to keep people paid or to keep businesses open through the cycle. As people getting back to work, the question is, will the consumer show up? Will they show up at restaurants? Will they get on a plane? Will they go to events? And if the answer is yes, a lot of those businesses will make it, and over time will be able to start paying their debt. If the answer is no, then a lot of those businesses won't make it. So people are very uncertain in what to invest in. And the airline industry is a great example where, even if people were totally went off a lockdown and everywhere and they were free to move around, right. Are they going to get on a plane? Are they going to get on a cruise ship? Are they going to, the consumer spending is what's going to drive the economy forward. And that's a big unknown. How will consumers behave over these next 3 months?
Paul, we spoke this morning to Jim Melstein, the co-CEO, co-chairman of Guggenheim Securities. One of the things he mentioned was, with these government programs, with these ballooning debt levels, that what will happen is that the corporate sector and wealthier individuals, people who have been able to benefit regardless of this time frame, are the ones that are going to have to be taxed more to pay for a lot of these efforts. I'm very curious as to your reaction to that thinking. Is that threat something your clients are considering?
Well, I'm not running for president, so I don't have to take any political positions. My view is, honestly, this has been a subject not just because of this. It's before this, we've had growing debt, and at some point, how do you pay it back? And you either do it through growing the economy faster than we have been able to in recent times, or you're going to have to increase tax, levels. And it's been a big political debate is how do you do that? Some have tried to tax, the 1%, but truthfully, there's not enough money there, to tax the 1%. If 50% of people in the U.S. pay no taxes, and their children are elderly or, not employed, and it's kind of hard to throw it on one small group. So given these economic levels, if you really started repaying debt, taxes would have to go up really across the board. And the question is, what does that do to continue growth? And that's, kind of the wide open question. And part of that's political, and part of it's economic reality. We need more revenue if we're going to pay back this debt.
So the idea of greater taxes to the 1%, how much of a threat is that, and how are people preparing for that?
I don't think most people are overly preparing for that. I think that most people would expect some reasonable increase in taxes to the wealthy. We've seen all sorts of programs. I think what they balk at are some of the more extreme, wealth taxes that are bigger numbers, or, versus taxes on income. But I think most people assume taxes will go up, and I for an individual think that's okay. Other people may not, but I think that taxes where they were even before the last cut on the wealthy were fine. So political reality is taxes are going to go up. The wealthy are going to have to bear more than those that aren't wealthy. It's how do you do it, how quickly, and what's the fair allocation of how you pay those taxes. So I think taxes are going up, and most people I think operate under that assumption right now.
Paul, thank you for joining us from St. Petersburg, Florida. From New York, for Bloomberg Radio and Television, this is Bloomberg.
This probably wasn't what you...
Imagine winning 10 grand.
Yes!
With Set for Life, you could win 10 grand every month for 30 years.
Get in! Amazing! Woo! Yes! Sweet! Unbelievable!
Set for Life from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Play Monday online or on the app. Prize may be capped. Rules, procedures, and game-specific rules apply. Players must be 16 or over.
What do you do to be an everyday superhero, like Dan?
So my baby boy Ben and me just wanted to share what we do to look after the environment. We put the wet wipes we use in the bin instead of down the loo. Would be pretty nasty if that lot ended up blocking our pipes.
Wet wipes and nappies block thousands of pipes every year. Save our sewers, rivers and seas by putting them in the bin where they belong. Visit thameswater.co.uk/bin it. Together, we can care for the environment.
Another day inside? I've turned my place into a gymnasium. I'm using the stairs for lunging and the washing machine as a power plate. But if you'd rather shed pounds off your outgoings, take a few minutes to check your bank account for any unwanted direct debits. It's just another small step towards money calm. Money Supermarket.
If you've used TuneIn much, you probably already know how to favorite your top stations and podcasts for quick access. But did you know you can organize your favorites too? Under your favorites page on the TuneIn app, hold and drag the stations to arrange the order to your liking.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, oh, well, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for a favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of active
round the bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike, just to go over the first couple of picks. Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn. Get your daily dose of NFL shop talk with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Start your morning off right with Around the NFL.
Injured, depleted roster into the playoffs, and I didn't think they belonged in the playoffs.
I think overall, though, it was a great divisional round weekend because you got the first one.
Run into the end zone with the Move the Sticks podcast.
We had a fun little Zoom cocktail hour last night.
Oh, yeah.
What a star-studded affair. Greg, you were there for the earlier part, but it really popped off a little later on. We had Zach Goldman.
And dive deep into the sidelines with the Peter King podcast.
On the occasion of his 50th birthday, come down and record a little bit of retrospective on the life and times of Brett Lorenzo Favre.
That sounds like a bestseller.
It sounds like a precursor to a funeral. That's what it is.
I wasn't thinking that.
Explore these and more hard-hitting NFL podcasts right here on TuneIn. With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games.
This shot scored, Malkin again. Bergeron, he scores!
With game replay on TuneIn, you can listen to every power play, slap shot, and goal of the 2019-2020 season so far.
Suter to Cunnin to Fiala. He scores!
And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search Classic Game Replays to start listening. Hit the court anytime with these great NBA podcasts on TuneIn. The Low Post.
So what struck you about this potential head-to-head matchup? What did we learn now that Zion is involved and LeBron and Zion go at each other for the first time?
You know, I still think both teams have to figure out kind of who are their guys when they get into a fourth quarter. I think you saw that with both of them. There were some kind of odd moments.
The Ringer NBA Show.
Who ended up winning the thing. But I did watch for a little bit when it was DeAndre Ayton and Zach LaVine playing against each other. And then as the days went on, Devin Booker was involved. Tell me you've seen the clip of Devin Booker when I can't remember who his opponent was.
Or the Haber Show.
At the end, it's because I worked in the NBA in the front office, and when I was 14 years old, my family moved back from Sudan to America. I jumped high school here in New York
Find these and more NBA podcasts right here on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Democratic Senator from Minnesota, Tina Smith. So, Senator, thank you so much for joining us on your first day back here. Give us your sense, from your perspective, what is the right answer about a possible new bill to appropriate money? Right answer for the country and for Minnesota.
Well, both Minnesota and our country are grappling with a massive public health and economic emergency. You know, I've been, even though I'm back in Washington today, I have been hard at work in Minnesota every single day helping Minnesota respond to this crisis. And so now that we are back here, I think our most important job is to continue that work. I am feel very strongly that we need to do the oversight that is our responsibility in Congress. And we can do that through our committee process, and I expect that we'll be doing that remotely. That is certainly my intention. And as we think about how we move forward with additional legislation, certainly at the top of my list is the needs that we have around testing and ample supplies of testing supplies, so that Americans can get the tests that we need so that we can safely reopen our economy and get people back into those who have been working from home or even worse, have been furloughed, can get back to their jobs. And I also think it's important to remember that state and local governments that provide police and fire and transportation and the most basic of fundamental services in this country are going to need help continuing to provide those services and help avoiding the potentially massive layoffs that would happen if the federal government doesn't step in to be a good partner.
So, Senator, let's take each of those in turn. First, with the testing. I know in the last bill that was passed, I think there was $25 billion for testing, another $75 billion for hospitals. Is that the sort of approach, or is appropriations for state and local in part appropriations for testing itself?
Well, I think that there's really two related but separate things. when it comes to testing, we are in Minnesota, for example, we are working to get to 20,000 tests a day, which would be one of the highest, my governor tells me, per capita testing rates of any place in the country. But we're struggling to get there because we can't get the swabs and the other testing supplies that are needed. So what many of us in Congress on the Democratic side want to do is to move legislation forward that would require the president to put into place and fully the Defense Production Act so that the full force of the federal government could be brought to bear on a coordinated response to making sure that states everywhere, including in rural areas, have access to the testing that they're going to need. That, to me, is what we need there as a strong federal response. The other issue is that states have the resources, state and cities and local communities, counties, for example, have the resources to continue to provide the basic services that Americans and Minnesotans count on. And that is going to be falling apart, literally, in just a very short period of time if the federal government doesn't step up.
Well, and Senator, it seems like a wide range of people agree that there has to be some help for the states. Already has been some, but needs to be more. President Trump has said on various occasions he thinks that's appropriate. At the same time, it's become very politically charged in Washington, with Mitch McConnell, the majority leader, saying it's a bailout for the blue states, something like that. If the Republicans do say, we want to appropriate money for the states and the municipalities, but we do want some provision to protect employers against lawsuits if they comply with CDC regulations, why isn't that a reasonable compromise?
Well, first, I really reject the idea that this is some sort of a blue state bailout. First of all, Republican states and Democratic states, red states and blue states are all facing the same kind of budget crisis. And, in my state of Minnesota, before I was in the Senate, I was lieutenant governor and I helped to run the state of Minnesota, and we had a strong budget surplus and a budget reserve. And in fact, Minnesota taxpayers send much more money to the federal government than we get in return. So that's not a bailout by any means. Now, the thing that Mitch McConnell is talking about is just strikes me as sort of the height of politicizing an issue that shouldn't be politicized. Police departments and fire departments shouldn't be politicized. But he's saying essentially in return for helping to support those basic services that all Americans rely on, he wants to let big companies, big corporations off the hook when it comes to keeping their workers safe. And to me, that's not a reasonable bargain at all. If my employer is requiring that in order to keep my job, I work in an environment that isn't safe, where there aren't appropriate safeguards for my health and the health of my family, I don't think that's right. I think that's why we have consumer protection in this country, and we shouldn't be sacrificing it now when people are so concerned about their health. And as a matter of fact, the reason that people will go back to work and will go back out to that restaurant or the local retail store is because they feel that it's safe. So to me, it's counterproductive to roll back safety and consumer standards or to not roll back the protections, right now.
Well, exactly. But Senator, this is not to argue, but just to literally understand. I understand we clearly have to have incentives for employers to do everything they can to keep their workers safe. Absolutely, no question about that. But as I understand, the proposal is sort of a safe harbor. If you comply with the CDC guidance, then you cannot be sued. Does that make some sense in an extraordinary circumstance? I mean, if I'm an employer and I do everything the CDC tells me to do, and yet something happens that none of us could have anticipated, should I be sued for that?
Well, I think that my basic view is that we should allow the courts and the way we guarantee justice in this country. I don't understand why we would need to roll that back at this time in our history. I don't think that it's necessary, and I think that it is what I really think that this is a kind of an opportunity to put forth the reform on liability that you call it reform, but the efforts at rolling back liability protections that have been the kind of the sacred cow of folks for many, many years. And let's not do that right now. Let's focus on what we can do to safely reopen our economy and make sure that we can be funding social services and police and fire. Let's do that right now and not try to get this other thing done.
Senator, I really appreciate you spending time with us today. As I say, in your first day back from Minnesota, that's Senator Tina Smith, Democrat of Minnesota. Coming up here next, President Trump wants new stimulus given to people by way of a payroll tax reduction. We're going to talk with David McIntosh. He is the president of Club for Growth. That's going up next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
In these times of loss and crisis, the people you trust to ask the questions you need answered become even more vital.
Should the president, though, impose the Defense Production Act?
Carol Masser and Jason Kelly.
Help us understand what we know so far.
Bloomberg Business Week.
They are on the front line of the impact of the coronavirus.
Weekday afternoons at 2 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
To buy your home, you became a house hunting ace, learned about loans, scoured neighborhoods, and asked the right questions. Now you're queen of your castle. If you manage that, you can get your retirement plan on track. Visiting aceyourretirement.org can help. With 401k tips and smart saving strategies, you'll feel empowered to own your retirement like you own your home. Go to aceyourretirement.org. Because when it comes to clearing financial hurdles, you're an ace. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then go to Babbel.com, download the app, and try it for free. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's Babbel.com.
Welcome back to Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. Well, President Trump yesterday said he has an idea about what should be done if there is a CARES 2.0. What we should do is make sure we reduce payroll tax deductions. We're welcome now David McIntosh. He is the president of Club for Growth to get his sense of what we should be doing for the economy. So, David, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you're well down there in Washington. Give us a sense. Do you think a payroll tax deduction is the way to go right now?
Be with you, and we're doing well. I think the payroll tax, a temporary waiver of it could boost the rehiring of people, but in the end, it also causes further complications on the fiscal side. One of the things that I think is even better is for Congress to grant the president the authority to waive regulations so that small businesses can come up, not have to worry about all the red tape, but immediately rehire people. It costs them about $15,000 per employee right now to comply with all of the federal regulations. If we can waive some of that, that's an even bigger incentive, I think, than the temporary payroll tax cut.
What kind of regulations do you have in mind waiving for small business? Because I must say, one of the things that occurs to me is OSHA. We tend to think of OSHA as protecting our employees. Don't we need something like that right now?
You would keep the ones you need for health and safety, but OSHA, for example, costs a huge amount to just keep up with the paperwork. So if you gave small businesses basically aren't going to enforce all of the paperwork requirements if you make a good faith effort to comply with the rules and keep it up to date. That's one example. There's all sorts of requirements on truckers, for example, that you can loosen up so they can have more flexible hours and be able to keep up with all the deliveries. A lot of state regulations limit who can sell what to when. If we can get rid of those so that people can have a lot more flexibility in rebuilding their businesses with a new customer base, right? People are still going to be cautious about going out, and you need to make it easier to deliver, for example, deliver your sangria with your Mexican meal.
So David, can we keep this pace up of appropriating money as a practical matter? I mean, I think that so far it's been something like 14% of GDP. We can't keep spending money that fast, can we? How do we come down off of that? What period of time do we need to come down off of that? And let's be clear, don't we have to raise taxes at some point on somebody someplace?
Well, let me talk about the spending, David, because I think you're exactly right. I view the spending that they've done as a bridge, and frankly, it was in a panic, so they probably made it too rich of a spending, so they've got to now look and see as we reopen the economy. That's going to be the best thing to do in terms of actually getting people back to work and things starting to come back to normal, rather than throw more money. That was sort of a temporary way of keeping people so they could continue to live during the shutdown. Raising taxes right now would be devastating on that effort to restart the economy. You're going to see anywhere from, I saw a prediction of a 40% cut in GDP in the second quarter. If you then add taxes on top of that, it's going to be even worse in the third and fourth quarter. So I think the key thing for us to do is remove the burdens the government puts on people that aren't necessary, simplify regulations, cut the red tape, and start reopening the businesses as soon as you can using the guidance of the healthcare officials.
So, David, you had the Club for Growth, and in a normal circumstance, we were talking about what can we do to grow the economy. Right now, we have to stop the hemorrhaging and start to come back to where it was before we can really talk about growth. But are there things coming out of this pandemic that you think might fundamentally change the economy in a good way that would allow us to have true growth going forward?
There are some things coming out of it. One, we're seeing a lot more people working from home. That's going to be an efficient way for people to do and get their job done. We'll see more people adopt to that and adapt it. And then second, we're seeing changes in our supply chain, right? Necessitated by the fact that China was completely shut down. Now we're worried and suspicious that they weren't completely candid with the rest of the world about this. And one way to rebuild the supply chain in the U.S. is, again, reduce the cost of doing business in the U.S. so that we can see that business return and all up and down that supply chain have a much more efficient model that will be different than it was before the coronavirus.
Okay, David, really appreciate you coming on. Always do. That's David McIntosh. He is the president of Club for Growth with some ideas about how to get the economy going again that don't necessarily involve appropriating a lot of money. That's going to do it for the first hour of Balance of Power, but there is a second hour. It's Over on Radio. And Over on Radio, we're going to be talking with Lieutenant Governor of Michigan, one of the hard-hit states by the coronavirus. He is Garland Gilchrist. So we'll be talking with Garland Gilchrist and others on the second hour of Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuits look at luxury. In the era of shrunken corporate budgets and a growing embrace of video conferences spurred on by travel restrictions, business class extravagances for road warriors risk becoming relics of a globe-trotting past. No airline is more at risk for this than Emirates, the high-flying Dubai-based airline known for its in-flight bars, first-class showers, and exceptional service, boasts the world's biggest long-haul fleet. It spent $130 million on wine alone last year. On long-haul flights, business-class customers are approximately 5 times more profitable than standard economy passengers, and it's doubled down on that segment. At home, The Last Dance overtakes Tiger King as the world's top documentary. ESPN's Michael Jordan documentary has been a boost for the cable giant at a time when the coronavirus pandemic has shut down live sports and slashed its audience ratings. Nonfiction television series as a whole are having a moment during the coronavirus pandemic. I'm Andrew O'Day, Bloomberg Radio. There are times when you have to go it alone, but these should not be those times.
Would the medical crisis in any other central bank execute?
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrell.
Walk me through the dynamics that are going to shape the euro in the coming months.
Weekday mornings at 7 Eastern.
Do we have the ability to coordinate with this virus?
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com.
When things move this quick, do things break?
Bloomberg, the world is listening.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
Debbie Hart is president of BioNJ, which represents the interests of more than 400 New Jersey-based biotech companies. She's also a strong voice in the biotech sector, supporting research universities like New Jersey Institute of Technology. She sees NJIT as a valuable partner in attracting venture capital and biotech startups to the Garden State.
So the number one reason that companies come here to New Jersey for the biotech industry is for our talent. We estimate that there were about 30 biotech companies in the early 90s in New Jersey, about 80 in 1998. Today there are more than 400. And that growth continues, and it's come from every possible angle. Other countries, other states, they've spun out of our academic institutions as well as our biotech and our pharma companies, and we expect that growth to continue long into the future. And NJIT is a pipeline for talent, for companies, for entrepreneurs to do that important work.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We have got the Dow and both the S&P and also NASDAQ right now trading mixed. We've got the Dow and the S&P lower. NASDAQ is higher. The NASDAQ Composite Index looking at a 9-point gain, up 0.1%. S&P down 14, down 0.5%. Dow Industrials down 207, a drop there of 0.9%. Stocks are paring losses as New York reports a decline in coronavirus deaths and hospitalizations. Technology shares are trading mixed ahead of a busy week for earnings. Industrial, financial, and real estate companies are the biggest losers in the S&P 500. Delta, American Airlines, and United Airlines Holdings all falling after Warren Buffett said over the weekend Berkshire Hathaway sold out of the 4 top U.S. airlines. Checking those stocks now, UAL is down 8.5%. American Airlines is down 9.4%. Delta is down 8.4%. Southwest lower now by 7.5%. 10-year down 4/32 with a yield of 0.62%. Gold up 0.3%, $17.05 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude up 1.7%, back above $20 a barrel now at $20.12. Talking about West Texas Intermediate crude. And with more on commodities trading, here's Bloomberg's Renita Young.
Yes, oil is bouncing between gains and losses. Funds shift away from near-term contracts, fearing a repeat of the meltdown last month that saw prices plunge below zero. And renewed concerns over the U.S.-China trade deal and tensions between North and South Korea are supporting gold prices. Yet gains are capped by a stronger U.S. dollar as the pace of new coronavirus infections slow in the U.S., and investors are also awaiting at least 11 central bank interest rate decisions this week. Renita Young.
Goldman Sachs Group and Morgan Stanley economists say there is evidence the world economy is starting to recover from the coronavirus and the restrictions placed on businesses and consumers. Jan Hatzius, chief economist at Goldman Sachs, said in a report to clients today that, quote, economic activity has probably bottomed now. Goldman Sachs is predicting advanced economies will contract an average 32% in the current quarter before growing 16% in the next 3 months and 13% in the final quarter of the year. 1:02 on Wall Street. Time now for the Market Drivers Report with a focus on American depository receipts. And here is Dave Wilson.
Thanks, Charlie. ADRs are falling along with U.S. shares. The S&P ADR index is down 0.5%, and the S&P 500 is also down 0.5%. European airline ADRs are lower along with shares of U.S. carriers, which are down in response to stock sales by Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway. Ireland's Ryanair has dropped 2.4% in U.S. trading. British Airways owner IAG has fallen 5%, and UK jet engine maker Rolls-Royce Holdings has lost 7%. Germany's ThyssenKrupp has declined more than 12%. 2 private equity firms are seeking investors to help pay for a deal to buy the company's elevator unit. That's according to the Financial Times, citing unnamed people with knowledge of the matter. Now, South African gold mining ADRs are higher as the precious metal rises for a second day. Anglo Gold Ashanti has added 3%, and Goldfields has gained 5.9%. And Italy's Ferrari has climbed 5.7%. The luxury car maker resumed production at 2 Italian factories that had been halted because of the coronavirus. Now, Ferrari cut this year's earnings and sales forecast in response to the virus, Charlie.
All right, we thank you very much, Dave Wilson, tracking those American depository receipts. Recapping equities mix, the Dow, the S&P both lower, NASDAQ higher, NASDAQ up 13, up 0.2%, S&P down 12, down 0.4, Dow Industrials down 192, lower now by 0.8%. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
This is Balance of Power.
Everybody in the world has one common enemy, and that's to win the war against this virus.
The first thing you do is listen to the medical professionals.
Those people that lost their pay, we want to see that pay continued.
Where the world of politics meets the world of business.
Our priority is the health and well-being and the lives of the American people.
We want to make sure that we are continuing to support our hospitals.
We've unleashed our most potent weapon of all, the courage of the American people.
Balance of Power with David Weston on Bloomberg Radio.
The Supreme Court goes remote with oral arguments on the telephone. Tensions rise between the United States and China over the coronavirus, and the markets don't take it all that well, coming off of a remarkably strong April and settling off some into May. From New York, welcome to the second hour of Bloomberg Balance of Power. I'm David Weston. Markets are mixed today, with the S&P and the Dow down a bit and the NASDAQ up a bit, in part perhaps in reaction to President Trump's pointing the finger at China over the weekend for the pandemic. Welcome now Bloomberg Markets blog cross-asset reporter Kriti Gupta. Kriti, thanks for being here. So I took my shot at characterizing the markets, but more important, what's your characterization?
I think you nailed it, David. Well, thank you for having me. You are really kind of seeing a risk-off tone in the markets today. Really not a ton of movement. A lot of it is going to be kind of in this wait-and-see approach. What does the president say? What kind of stimulus numbers do we see? Are we going to see any progress on that payroll tax? All of this action kind of really based on what's happening in Washington right now. A lot of eyes on what happens between the U.S. and China, some PTSD a little bit, if you will, from those trade tensions we saw last year. Seems like a lifetime away, but some of that kind of seeping back into the markets here, and that's why you're seeing red on the screen today.
So is tech doing a bit better? Is that why we're seeing the NASDAQ up a bit? And why is that, if that's true?
You are seeing the NASDAQ in the green a little bit, but not by the margin that you have in the past. So the NASDAQ, of course, relatively a little weaker as well. And you might actually see that just because we're out of the water with earnings season from tech. So we've kind of resumed that bid for those U.S. cash-rich, liquid global growth firms, that bid for U.S. tech as a safe haven that we've seen all along. So kind of along the lines of gold being higher, the treasuries as well, a little bit of a bid for the Japanese yen. So in that risk-off tone, this kind of bid for the NASDAQ for those big tech heavyweights really does make sense.
So, Kriti, you mentioned earnings. We have a slew of earnings out this week. Has the market properly discounted it? Because they have, earnings down something like 20-24% or something like that?
That's right. And actually, if we kind of broaden it out a little bit and just look at earnings as a whole first, you're actually seeing the earnings from the first quarter skew a little bit in the positive direction. My colleague Cameron Christ mentioning this today on the Markets Live blog that more than half of the companies in the S&P 500 index have reported. If you actually look at their aggregate surprise index, it is skewed a little bit positive. So in theory, we should actually be seeing a little bit more green, potentially some justification for why we're not seeing even more bearish action this far into earnings season.
Talk to us about commodities. Oil has been really whacked badly. It started to come back some. How's it doing?
It is coming back a little bit. You are seeing WTI above the $20 mark. That is a very significant handle to have, very significant milestone for just the journey we've had. I mean, it wasn't too long ago that we were seeing negative crude prices. A lot of that is going to come off from the fact that we're seeing a lot of these big ETF funds that were kind of basing their futures contracts in that front month contract spread a little bit of their exposure along the curve. So, for example, we had a lot of those headlines coming out of USO. That's the big retail ETF that allows just kind of mom and pop investors to get exposure to oil via the stock market. You saw them, that fund, kind of spread their exposure out to July contracts, August contracts, September contracts. So you're seeing a little less volatility here in the front month contract right now. That's actually helping the oil story a little bit. But let's get this super clear and out in the open, we are still in the 20s here. $26 on Brent, about $20 on WTI. Those are still not good numbers. Analysts having about the $40 handle to really get the oil sector back up and running. So you may be seeing green on the screen today, but still not a predictor.
When it comes to equities, take a bit broader perspective. We had an extraordinary month in April. It was up more than any month since 1987, I think, is the number. At the same time, Thursday it turned down, and Friday it turned down. Today is decidedly, I think, soft. I think it's fair to say. Does that tell us anything about longer-term trends here?
Well, I think the big question, and you may be hinting to, David, is the bottom in? Is this kind of rally or this kind of bounce back that we saw from the end of March really justified? And the answer is that, yeah, you know what, it could be. There could be a case here for that. And I want to take a look back at history, because I think the 2008-2009 financial crisis is just the closest that we can get to anything along these lines. And if you actually look at this, I want to give this credit here to my colleague Yi on the Markets Live blog. He wrote about this last week, that the peak in jobless claims is really where you want to go, where you want to look. You saw over 30 million Americans unemployed at the moment. That is not a pretty picture for the economy. Here you're seeing stocks really bounce back, especially on the days when those numbers were announced, because that was kind of threw a lot of people for the loop. But if you look back in 2009, when you saw those jobless claims peak, that coincided with the bottom in the S&P 500 back in that last financial crisis. So if you're going by that measure, you could argue here that the bottom is already in based on that stat. But then again, the question is, if stocks are really an anticipatory asset, we're not expecting the economy to fully reopen. Are these gains justified? And that really depends on what kind of investor you are.
Well, and neither one of us is going to try to call a bottom. But even if the bottom's in, the Fed put it in as a practical matter. We're at something like 19 price-earnings ratio right now. And that seems to be largely supported just by the extraordinarily low interest rates.
That's right. And I think that's, another major concern. I'm going to put on the bear case column here, because a lot of these questions, is the Fed propping up markets just by providing liquidity into the markets? Remember, when we first saw this major volatility back in March, that was the big issue. You just weren't getting any ability to be able to actually trade your positions at the prices that you wanted. In addition, of course, to volatility becoming really high. That's what panic looked like in the markets. It seems like a lifetime ago, but that was only a month ago. And the Fed was a big part of kind of easing those tensions. So that's why you're on the screen right now. You're not seeing these massive moves of 8 or 9% declines, or 8 and 9% to the upside. You're seeing a calm 1, 2, even 3% in both directions, which is actually a good sign relative to where we were. That being said, a big concern here is what happens when the Fed unwinds their position.
And we could use a bit of calm right now. Okay, many thanks to Bloomberg's Kriti Gupta. Coming up, is China to blame? We talk with Elizabeth Economy of the Council on Foreign Relations about the Trump administration's ratcheting up of the rhetoric. That's coming up next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio.
What began in China has expanded worldwide.
Is it China that's going to lead that consumer recovery?
What have we learned?
I'm curious as to what you're monitoring most closely in the news flow.
What can we predict?
Are you seeing a time when you can expect recovery in global travel?
Bloomberg Daybreak Asia.
Do people realize that those numbers are going to get a lot worse?
Tonight at 6 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Hi, everyone. Al Roker here. As a guy with his own catchphrase, I appreciate that after 75 years, Smokey's only said,
"Only you can prevent wildfires."
But I'm filling in because there's a lot more to report. Like when it's dry or windy. Be careful burning yard waste, because wildfires can even start in your neck of the woods. Go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
To protect his home and family from disaster, Steve used courage, wisdom, and his camera phone.
That should do it.
Way to go, Steve! By simply taking digital pictures of his family's important documents, Steve can always have them stored safely online, no matter when disaster strikes. Learn other simple ways to protect your home and family before a natural disaster at ready.gov. That's ready.gov. A message from FEMA and the Ad Council.
The world's financial... The pressure washer that means your patio is barbecue ready. The 4K projector that brings the thrill of the cinema to you. The yoga mat that turns your lounge into a studio. With a choice of ways to pay, you can make the most of your leisure time. You can say yes when it matters most at very.co.uk. Goods and services provided by Shop Direct Home Shopping Limited. Credit provided by Shop Direct Finance Company Limited.
This is a message from the government about the emergency measures to support the economy during the period of disruption caused by the coronavirus. To help you, your business, and your workers affected, you can apply for cash grants, business rate holidays, statutory sick pay relief packages, as well as the coronavirus job retention and self-employment income support schemes. For information, go to gov.uk/business-support now.
Get your cook on with Asda. With Butcher Selection quarter pounder beef burgers, get a 4-pack for just £2.28. And salmon fillets, get a 2-pack for only £2.97. So dinner's always a winner. At Asda, we're committed to low prices every day on the quality products you need. Asda. Selected stores online, subject to availability.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Typical Danny. Imagine trying to unwind at a spa weekend and you wind up getting your mud pack all over your fave personalised dressing gown. But no worries, just one wash and my clothes will smell perf with Surf. Surf gives you long-lasting fragrance with natural essential oils. Find your fragrance in Surf's laundry range.
Imagine winning 10 grand. Yes! With Set for Life, you could win 10 grand every month for 30 years. Get in! Amazing! Woo! Yes! Sweet! Unbelievable! Set for Life from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Play Monday online or on the app. Prize may be capped. Rules, procedures and game-specific rules apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Max is dreaming of riding a giant chameleon whilst fighting a clan of ninjas. But in reality, he's helping fight COVID-19 in his sleep. Like thousands of others, he's joined the Dream Team. By using the Dream Lab app, they're helping scientists speed up the search for potential treatments.
I'll fight you.
You go, Max. Search Vodafone Dream Lab and join the Dream Team tonight.
Dream Lab app is owned by Vodafone Foundation, an independent charity. Registration number 1089625. Full terms at vodafone.co.uk/dreamlab.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet, just getting word that Gold's Gym International has sought court protection from its creditors, unable to keep up with debt payments after the prolonged shutdown caused by the coronavirus outbreak. The Dow and the S&P, they are both trading lower. NASDAQ now is advancing. Stocks are paring losses after the U.S. escalated rhetoric against China over the coronavirus. Right now we have got the S&P 500 index. It is trading down 20 points, a drop of 0.7%. NASDAQ just turning lower. NASDAQ reversing its earlier gains, down now by 0.1%. The Dow down 253. That is a drop of 1.1%. 10 years down 4/32 with a yield of 0.62%. Gold up 0.3%. 17.05 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude up 1.8%. $20.12 a barrel. Recapping, the S&P down 20, a drop of 0.7%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you so much, Charlie Pellet. From New York, this is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio. Over the weekend, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo cited what he called enormous evidence that the coronavirus originated in a Wuhan lab. And President Trump, well, he laid the blame for the pandemic spreading on the Chinese, threatening possible sanctions, including tariffs. Welcome now, Elizabeth Economy, Senior Fellow and Director of Asian Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations. So, Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us. Let's start with what we know or think we know about the origins of this virus. What is the real story? Because I hear very conflicting reports.
I think the real story is we don't know the real story. And no one has come forth, I think, with the definitive answer about precisely where and how this virus began to spread. I mean, I think everybody agrees it was probably in Wuhan in some form or another, and perhaps the Wuhan wet market. But I seek truth from facts, as Deng Xiaoping once said, and until I see those facts, I'm reluctant to suggest that. For example, as Secretary Pompeo indicated, the likelihood is that it came from the Wuhan lab. The virus was somehow released.
There has been a report about the so-called Five Eyes, which, as I understand it, is 5 intelligence agencies that compile information and share information with one another, coming out and really issuing a fairly damning report about China. Do we know about that?
So, I mean, I think the Five Eyes report, and I've only seen a report of the report. I haven't seen the report. And so these are like Australia and the United States, New Zealand, the UK, and Canada are the Five Eyes. And they share intelligence. I think that there is certainly agreement that all along the way, the Chinese leadership, first with the local government and then in the central government in Beijing, made the decision to withhold critical information. And whether it was because they were struggling to figure out what to do with it, or they didn't want to alarm their public, or they wanted to try to get things under control. How malicious or malign the cover-up was, I don't know. But I think there's broad agreement that China knew more than it was saying at various points in time. I don't think that the Five Eyes report comes down definitively in any way on, again, the source of the virus. I think that's an issue where the weight of the scientific community seemed to come down again on the wet market, but the reports keep percolating somehow that there's evidence about the virus originating in this Wuhan lab.
And tell us also about the Chinese government's response. As you say, it's thought that they were a little slow in the uptake. They didn't reveal everything. We remember the local government actually sanctioning that poor doctor, the research doctor, who ended up dying of it. But one of the reports I've seen is that actually China put much more restrictions on internal traffic within China, travel within traffic, than they did external. Is that true?
So that was suggested by an article that was written, became very popular. It seems as though people who have actually looked back at the major international flights would say that that's probably not the case. If you look at some private flights, it's really getting into the weeds, but if you look at some private flights, it's true that it looked like things were still happening. People were still leaving China and entering, but if you looked at the major airlines, there wasn't really a significant difference between the closing of domestic airline flights and the international ones. So that's my understanding at this point.
So, Elizabeth, take the broader perspective, not getting into the weeds, which I tend to do. I like to get in the weeds. But the broader perspective, what is this likely to mean for China's relations, not just with the United States, but with the rest of the Western world? Because there's a fair number of European countries now that are also raising some real criticisms about China.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think Xi Jinping right now has, 3 priorities, and the first is really to get his economy, open and running and not, affect the health of the Chinese people while he's doing it. Second is controlling the internal narrative, and we've seen that the government continues to detain and arrest people who are trying to, get the truth out and hold on to reports that demonstrate that there was a cover-up. So that's still continuing. But I think that the big issue for China moving forward is certainly also going to be how to right its position on the diplomatic stage, because everything from the export of the subsidized substandard, PPE, to the very aggressive diplomacy that the Chinese ambassadors have taken, calling on other countries to thank them for their sacrifice and for the PPE, sort of the treatment of the Africans in southern China that got a lot of play. You've seen a lot of negative, very negative reaction broadly, globally, toward China. The longer-term impacts, I think, number one, and this is already happening, is going to be the type of move that I think the Trump administration was beginning to encourage in terms of a supply chain movement away from China is certainly going to accelerate. And Japan, for one, Prime Minister Abe has offered, $2 billion pot to encourage Japanese companies to move out of China and reshore to Japan. So I think that's going to be one significant thing. Then I guess there are questions about whether or not, as Huawei continues to push forward, countries like Germany and the UK, where there was substantial unhappiness, among some members of the government over the government's decisions to lean toward putting Huawei in the not in the critical infrastructure, but in the infrastructure, whether or not those decisions get turned around as a result of this. Because fundamentally, underpinning all of this is really an issue of trust. And can you trust the Chinese government? And I think, there's one big takeaway at this point. We don't know how the story is going to play out fully, but one big takeaway is you can't really trust the Chinese government.
Elizabeth, really appreciate you being with us. Very intelligent, very informative. That's Elizabeth Economy of the Council on Foreign Relations. Coming up, in case you doubted that the world is changing from the pandemic, well, take a look at the Supreme Court now holding oral arguments over the telephone. We're joined by my colleague June Grasso and by the Bloomberg Supreme Court reporter Greg Storr. That's coming up next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. U.S. stocks are lower on geopolitical concerns. The Dow is falling 200 points, S&P down 10, but the Nasdaq is up 11 points. Airline stocks are among the biggest losers today after billionaire Warren Buffett said over the weekend he's no longer investing in American, Delta, Southwest, and United Airlines. Retailer J.Crew has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, but its signature stores and outlets will remain open for now. And retailers started planning for the next holiday season as soon as the last one ended, so it's not too soon for the forecasters to start weighing in. Fitch Ratings says even if the stores they closed to slow the spread of the coronavirus can reopen this month or the next, unemployment in the industry will remain high for months to come. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
You know your body, and you know when something's off, when something doesn't feel quite right. Don't ignore symptoms like fatigue, joint pain, rashes, and fever. They could be signs of lupus. Listen to your body. Take care of yourself. We're here to help you take control of your health. Learn how at BeFierceTakeControl.org. Brought to you by the Lupus Foundation of America and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Economics.
Are we still ultra-accommodative?
Finance.
Do you see this as a technical correction?
Investment.
The markets move seismically.
The Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast.
Mistakes are made when you sell something because you need to sell it.
Tom Keene, Jonathan Ferro, and the names that shape the world's markets.
So we speak with Professor Schiller of Yale University.
David Solomon, the Goldman Sachs CEO, joins me.
Bloomberg Surveillance. Listen today at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts. In-depth analysis.
This is a message from the government about the emergency measures to support the economy during the period of disruption caused by the coronavirus. To help you, your business, and your workers affected, you can apply for cash grants, business rate holidays, statutory sick pay relief packages, as well as the coronavirus job retention and self-employment income support schemes. For information, go to gov.uk/business-support now.
When next in Asda, why not try our new mobile Scan and Go app? Simply download the app, scan your shop with your mobile, and pack as you go. Then head to the self-checkout to pay. Quick, easy, and contact-free, so you have more time to get your cook on. Asda. Mobile data charges may apply. Suitable for iOS 9 and Android 5 or above. Selected stores subject to availability.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care about each other, about our planet, about creating a better world for everyone, and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Imagine winning 10 grand. Yes! With Set for Life, you could win 10 grand every month for 30 years. Get in! Amazing! Woo! Yes! Sweet! Unbelievable! Set for Life from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Play Monday online or on the app. Prize may be capped. Rules, procedures and game-specific rules apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Max is dreaming of riding a giant chameleon whilst fighting a clan of ninjas. But in reality, he's helping fight COVID-19 in his sleep. Like thousands of others, he's joined the Dream Team. By using the Dream Lab app, they're helping scientists speed up the search for potential treatments.
I'll fight you.
You go, Max. Search Vodafone Dream Lab and join the Dream Team tonight.
Dream Lab app is owned by Vodafone Foundation, an independent charity. Registration number 1089625. Full terms at vodafone.co.uk/dreamlab.
Want Apple's latest Mac?
From just £34 a month.
With no deposit.
Buy online now from krcs.co.uk. Your local Apple experts. And get your Mac with all this, plus 2 years warranty.
And free next day delivery.
See our full Apple range now at krcs.co.uk. Representative example, cash price 103306, 36 months at 33.97. Total payable 1222.92. Representative 11.9% APR.
This is another ad for QuickFit. If you're still using your car for essential journeys, this one's for you. QuickFit want you to know that their centres around the country are still open, but only to carry out essential work and maintenance. They're taking extra measures to keep their staff and customers safe, so you can be safe when you're out on the roads. For more information or to find your local centre, visit quickfit.com. QuickFit. Still there when you need them.
Hey, it's Jacoby here from Jalen and Jacoby. And after you watch The Last Dance on ESPN, which you're obviously going to do just like the rest of us stuck in our homes in quarantine, you can join Jalen Rose and I for Jalen and Jacoby, The After Show. And we will be joined by the director of the documentary series, Chasing Air, to discuss each episode in detail. You can hear our after show right here on ESPN Radio on Sunday nights after the episodes air, and they'll be available on the Jalen and Jacoby podcast feed.
Search Jalen and Jacoby to listen today.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Balance of Power with David Weston.
Coming up on Balance of Power, one of the last bastions of tradition in Washington fell today when the Supreme Court held arguments over the telephone for the first time ever. We're joined by June Grasso and our Supreme Court reporter, Greg Storr. But first, let's get a market check with Charlie Pellet.
And I thank you very much, David Weston. Happy Monday, by the way. The Dow, the S&P, they are both lower. NASDAQ is higher. Bottom line, stocks are falling for a third day after Washington escalated rhetoric against Beijing over the coronavirus. Technology shares are mixed ahead of a busy week for earnings. Industrial, financial, and real estate companies are the biggest losers in the S&P 500 index today. Delta, American, and United Airlines Holdings are all trading lower. Factory orders dropping by the most 6 decades. That story from Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice.
Chalk it up to the pandemic. Factory orders dropped by more than 10% in March, the largest drop in data back in 1958. The weakness was across the board, with the exception of military hardware. Excluding big-ticket defense orders, total orders dropped even more than the headline. The weakness continues. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Radio.
Gold's Gym International is seeking court protection from its creditors unable to keep up with debt payments after the prolonged shutdown caused by the coronavirus outbreak. We've got shares of Boeing and General Electric also trading lower today after Warren Buffett said changes in the aviation industry will affect those companies, which makes planes and jet engines. It's an ugly day for a lot of airlines today. UAL, for example, down 8.5%. American Airlines down 10.5%. Delta slumping 8.9%. Southwest down by 7.4%. NASDAQ up 10 now, a gain of 0.1%. S&P down 15, down 0.5. Dow Industrials down 210, a drop there of 0.9%. 10-year down 6/30 seconds with a yield of 0.63%. We've got gold up 6.40 the ounce now, 17.06 up 0.4%. West Texas Intermediate crude up 2.2%, $20.21 a barrel. Again, recapping, equities lower with the S&P down 14, down 0.5%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Balance of Power continues. And once again, here's your host, David Weston.
Thank you so much, Charlie. Those of us who follow the Supreme Court got to do something today we'd never done. Listen in to Supreme Court oral arguments live. It was made necessary by that pandemic, but it has changed the world as we know it. To talk about how big a change this could be, we're joined now by my colleague, June Grasso, host of Bloomberg Law, and by Greg Storr, our Supreme Court reporter. So thank you both very much. It's good to have the three of us together again, finally. Yes. So, Greg, I have to confess, I tuned in. I listened to a big chunk of it. It was a boring case, at least for me, a trademark case. But give us a sense of just how big a revolution this is.
It was completely different. In addition to it being the first telephone argument, which is completely different from their standpoint, it was, as you said, the first chance that people all across the country had to actually hear an argument while it was happening. And that's something that the Supreme Court, the justices, have really resisted over the years. They've said they're worried that will change the way arguments go if they allow live audio or even video. But because of the coronavirus outbreak, this was the only way that the public could have access to the arguments.
But exactly focus on that distinction, Greg, because I understand why they had to do it by telephone, but they didn't have to let us listen in, did they? Couldn't have had a secure line? That was a big move.
That's a fair point, David. That is true. But had they done that, I mean, normally, as you know, the courtroom fits several hundred people, so some members of the public can go if you get there really, really early to stand in line. And, while the court didn't really give us an explanation for why they went this route, you can imagine that they were thinking, the alternative might be that we are shutting everybody out from being able to hear it while it happens. And then you also had the issue of media access. If they were going to, allow the media to cover it live, there was a danger that the audio would get out, through the members of the media. And so they perhaps figured, well, we might as well go ahead and authorize it, let them do it, and it will, be a bit of an experiment for us.
So, Greg, I agree with David. Though I listened to the whole argument, which went 15 minutes overtime, it was technical and not so exciting. But I thought that it basically went off well. There was one time Justice Sonia Sotomayor, I guess, forgot to unmute her line, and Justice Breyer was garbled at one point. They seemed to fix everything, but yet I don't think the public really gets an idea from this what a regular argument is when they're on the bench and it's a hot bench.
No, you're right. It's very different. There wasn't the kind of narrative that often flows through an argument. There were a few occasions where one justice would say, to pick up on Justice so-and-so's question a few minutes ago. But usually you have this sense of more of a conversation that can involve a lot of different people and justices jumping in. And sometimes what you pick up from the argument is less the actual question than who seems to be so engaged in an argument that he or she is jumping in at a certain point and acting really skeptical of an argument that somebody else is making. Some of that was missing here. This was a little more formal and structured and didn't have quite the flavor of a usual Supreme Court argument.
Yeah, and I thought that the first questions from Justice Roberts and Justice Thomas, well, that's another point to bring up, and Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg were kind of stilted. But then Justice Breyer came in and he was like, good morning, and he seemed a little more at ease, and it went smoother from there. But tell us about Justice Thomas.
Yeah, so Justice Thomas, as almost everybody knows, rarely asks questions in arguments. He once went 10 years without asking them. But this new format, and one of the things he said is, in terms of why he doesn't, is that he thinks that the lawyers don't have enough time to talk. His colleagues ask too many questions, and he generally doesn't seem to like the free-for-all nature of it. Well, in this format, it was, as I said, a little more structured, and because they went, very clearly in a seniority order, it almost would have seemed strange to skip over Justice Thomas, and go straight from Chief Justice Roberts to Justice Ginsburg. So he did. He asked questions of both sides. They were not really questions that were that revealing, and they were, perhaps not that different from anybody else's questions in a sense. But it was certainly a striking notion. It was something that actually a couple of his law clerks had predicted, former law clerks had predicted beforehand, that maybe this format might make a difference for Justice Thomas. I suppose we will see him asking additional questions in the future arguments, and those could be quite interesting.
So, Greg, let me be a contrarian here. I had to spend a year up there clerking for Justice Powell 100 years ago, and the basic understanding up there was that cases never got decided on the oral argument. They were decided on the briefs. It was important to have the oral argument to give the parties the opportunity to feel like they had their say, but they really didn't get decided on that. Does it really make a difference?
The justices generally say, it rarely, it occasionally makes a difference. It usually doesn't. One thing they often talk about, as you know, David, is that the argument is the first time they have a chance to, or the first time that they do, really have a conversation among themselves. It's not a direct conversation, but oftentimes they, or typically they go in there not really knowing how the other justices are thinking. And it may be an occasion to try to shape the way their colleagues think about it. There's still some of that, no doubt, in these cases. Maybe it's a little bit less. The justices are all going to kind of have to get used to how I shape, another justice's thinking of a case, especially if I'm not the first one who gets to ask questions, if I have to wait until my turn at the end, if I only have one shot at it. So that conversation aspect may be a little bit less than it usually is.
Greg, just briefly, another point was that there were two women arguing today, one who has a record of 36-2, and then the Solicitor General, and that's kind of unusual at the court.
It is very unusual at the court. I believe in the 10 arguments we have over the next over these 2 weeks, there may be only one other woman arguing. It's a very male-dominated institution. One of the lawyers, as you mentioned, Lisa Blatt, is a former assistant to the Solicitor General and now a private lawyer, and she is very much a frequent player. But she is certainly in the minority among the kind of regulars at the Supreme Court bar.
Yeah, I have to say, having said all this, I thought it was fun. I'll listen again. I really enjoyed it. Okay, many thanks now to Bloomberg's June Grasso and to Greg Storr. Coming up, Michigan has turned into a hotspot, both for the coronavirus and for demonstrations against its stay-at-home order. We talk with Michigan Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist. That's coming up next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then go to Babbel.com, download the app, and try it for free. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's Babbel.com.
Hey y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
If knowledge is power.
The trampoline that makes Dad feel like a kid again. The projector that turns film night into outdoor cinema night. The hot tub that transforms your garden into a spa retreat. With a choice of ways to pay, you can make the most of family time. You can say yes when it matters most at very.co.uk. Goods and services provided by Shop Direct Home Shopping Limited. Credit provided. Subject to status by Shop Direct Finance Company Limited. 18+.
A half-price dream holiday. Wouldn't want to miss that. A takeaway for free. Wouldn't want to miss that. And 30 gigs data for just £10 a month on Smarty Mobile. You definitely don't want to miss that. Our Smarty SIM comes packed with 30 gigs of data and unlimited calls and texts for just £10 a month on a 1-month plan. That's why Smarty won Best Value SIM-only network in the Uswitch Mobile Awards 2020. Don't miss out. Search Smarty Mobile. Smarty. Simple, honest mobile. Smarty.co.uk.
When next in Asda, why not try our new mobile Scan and Go app? Simply download the app, scan your shop with your mobile, and pack as you go. Then head to the self-checkout to pay. Quick, easy, and contact-free, so you have more time to get your cook on. Asda. Mobile data charges may apply. Suitable for iOS 9 and Android 5 or above. Selected stores subject to availability.
Imagine winning 10 grand. Yes! With Set for Life, you could win 10 grand every month for 30 years. Get in! Amazing! Woo! Yes! Sweet! Unbelievable! Set for Life from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Play Monday online or on the app. Prize may be capped. Rules, procedures, and game-specific rules apply. Players must be 16 or over.
To help make the most of your time at home, TuneIn is sharing our top activities for social distancing. Tip number 5, cooking something. We all get stuck in a culinary rut with our normal routine. Shake things up in the kitchen by trying an ambitious new recipe or an over-the-top dessert. If cooking really isn't your thing, you can always support your local restaurants by ordering out. For more indoor inspiration, search Listen from Home on TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Be part of the sports conversation with Sports Talk Radio on TuneIn. Join the discussion around your favorite local teams with sports stations broadcasting in your area.
The game will be 185 to 183, and somebody wins, whatever. Football, it's either full go or it's not. You got like, oh, it's thud. I can practice what they call.
Follow national storylines and debates with ESPN Radio.
Does the NBA have a hiring problem when it comes to front office jobs in the leagues and a minority hiring issue? Stephen A. chimed in on that today on First Take.
It also resonates with me, Max. You can appreciate this position. One of the candidates was Brian Colangelo. We know what happened. I like Brian, but we know.
And hear what's happening worldwide with international channels like Talk Sport.
Seems as though I'm sort of doing my life in reverse at the moment. I was on cricket tours when I was 20 years old, and now I'm 31. I'm out sat at home, injured playing PlayStation. So it's a tournament basically where you create your own character.
In your backyard and around the globe. Keep your finger on the pulse of the sports world with TuneIn.
Hey, y'all, we're taking the Marty Party to a whole new level with the Marty Smith's America podcast with Gerald McCoy.
I truly believe that Carolina made a mistake letting Cam go. This is not a personal shot at Teddy Bridgewater. This could have been Andy Dalton. This could have been whoever they brought in. Cam has so much left. Somebody's really getting a great one, man. And I don't think people really understand what they're getting.
Search Marty Smith America to listen.
And breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Mixed Monday, the Dow, the S&P lower, NASDAQ is higher. Stocks are falling for a third day. The S&P now at the lowest in a week, down 13 points at 28.16, a drop of 0.5%. The Dow is down 192, down 0.8%. NASDAQ is up 13. That is a gain of about 0.2%. Stocks are falling after the U.S. escalated rhetoric against China over the coronavirus. The 10-year down 5/32, the yield 0.62%. Gold is up 0.4%, 17.06 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude now surging 2.5%, up 47 cents the barrel. WTI is now at $20.25. Recapping, S&P down 12, a drop of 0.5%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you so much, Charlie Pellet. From New York, this is Balance of Power. I'm David Weston. Michigan has the fourth highest tally of deaths from the coronavirus in the nation, and its governor has taken strong action to keep people at home and ensure social distancing, which has led to vigorous demonstrations, including when armed men went into the state capitol to disrupt its business. For a review of the state of the pandemic in his state, we welcome now Michigan Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist. So, Lieutenant Governor, thank you so much for joining us today. Before we get to the protests, let's talk about the state of the coronavirus in Michigan. How's it doing? Last time we talked, there was a big problem. Detroit, Wayne County, Oakland County, right over the surrounding areas.
Thank you for having me today. And it's important to note that those social distancing measures and what everyone has been doing in Michigan to stay home, stay safe, it's beginning to work. We're seeing that our curve has hit a plateau, and we're hoping that we can start to see that it comes to the decline. And we're thinking about how we can re-engage certain parts of our state and parts of our economy, driven by the science, of course. So the interventions are starting to work. We certainly are still focused on the racial disparities. I'm chairing our racial disparities task force to see how we can combat those in real time and over the long term. But we're going in the right direction in Michigan as long as we can increase our testing capacity, and that's what's going to be really critical to getting to this next phase.
So focus just for a moment, if you would, Mr. Lieutenant Governor, on the disparities with respect to race. It's something we've seen indications of elsewhere in the country. You have a particular issue in Detroit because of the very high percentage of African Americans. What have you learned about that? Are there things that can be done either to protect the people so they don't get the virus in the first place, or to treat them after they do?
Absolutely. So some of the things are related to the fact that people of color in Michigan and people who live in poverty in Michigan, and we have a lot of people in both those categories in the city of Detroit, they are at increased risk of exposure to the virus because they do things like work low-wage work at a grocery store, or they may be first responders or people who work for utility companies, and they're out and doing their work, which is protecting and sustaining life, and that's actually putting them at more risk of exposure. So we're recommending different protocols for bus drivers and people who are riding the bus who may need to get there to get to the grocery store, recommending stronger protocols and measures for people who work at grocery stores. And we're also importantly looking at ways for people to be able to isolate. Once you test positive, then you have to make sure you can isolate from others to not spread the virus. That's very difficult for a lot of people in Detroit who live in small homes or who are not able to self-isolate because of their poverty. And so we're working on providing solutions for people to be able to isolate and stop the spread of this virus in low-income communities.
What is the state of the healthcare system? Again, there was a time when there was concern about some of the hospital system in Detroit and the surrounding area.
Yeah, two of our biggest hospital systems in the city, and that service the city of Detroit, were at capacity and was really concerning for us. And that's part of the reason why we took such strong action, because, as you know, when your hospital systems get overrun, that's when you really start to see spikes in deaths. And our systems are starting to get things under control. We're starting to improve our pipeline of personal protective equipment and tests, as I alluded to before. And so that's helped relieve some of that. But alarmingly, we are seeing spikes in other parts of the state. On the western side of the state in Kent County, where Grand Rapids, Michigan is, some of our northern, more rural communities are seeing some spikes. And what's alarming about that is they have much less hospital capacity and a much smaller number of ICU beds in those parts of the state. So we're really watching that very closely.
Well, that takes us upstate, which is a part of the issue here, as I understand it, from the governor's order, which included you couldn't go to your cabin up north to hunt or whatever. You couldn't go back and forth, I should say. Tell us about these demonstrations, because those of us who know Michigan reasonably well were really taken aback when we saw those photographs of people with serious weapons going inside the state capitol. Was that overblown? Was that as big an issue as it seemed to be in the media?
Well, I'll put it to you like this. I'm the president of the Michigan Senate. I'm the first black person to hold my position as lieutenant governor. And for me to see people waving Confederate flags and carrying assault-style rifles into the chamber that I preside over, yeah, that was real. And it was dangerous in terms of physical security, and it was reckless in terms of our public health and the communities that those folks came from, coming up and potentially being exposed to coronavirus. They weren't wearing masks. They weren't social distancing, and they were creating havoc and trying to intimidate lawmakers. That was really problematic. But really, I don't think it was about that. This was really a political demonstration, not about COVID-19. But I am concerned about the communities where folks came from potentially now being exposed to the coronavirus in ways that they could have avoided by protesting in a way that was safe given the pandemic that we're in.
By the look of the photograph, and I'm not an expert on this, it looked like some of them had assault weapons. Is it lawful to take a weapon if you're not a law enforcement official into the state capitol?
So frankly, ridiculously, and Michigan is one of the two states where it is legal to carry a firearm into the state capitol. And unfortunately, it is illegal to carry a poster into the state capitol. These are laws that obviously need to be addressed because this is a tool for intimidating lawmakers. And we actually had some lawmakers, I think quite dangerously stoking and encouraging those types of demonstration. And that is simply uncalled for at a time when people are so wound up because we're dealing with things we've never had to deal with in our lifetime. Stresses and emotions are high, and that can lead to bad things happening when you mix it with giant weapons. I'm 6 feet 8 inches tall, and I see weapons almost as big as I am. That's really problematic when it comes to how we're supposed to do the people's business and govern in Michigan.
Is the governor backing off at all? I mean, she came under a fair amount of criticism. Again, what I read at least was particular about this restriction on going up north, back and forth, up north to your cabin.
Yeah, so we have begun the process of looking at how we will know when it is safe to re-engage certain sectors and certain parts of the economy. We've had a really thoughtful process working with business leaders and community leaders across the state of Michigan to evaluate which types of activities are low risk and high risk, and how we can make sure that we have monitors on our public health capacity. And we've already made announcements last week how we're looking at re-engaging things like certain types of construction, certain types of outdoor work and activity. And so we're taking a methodical approach that is based in science, not based in politics. Political intimidation is not what's going to get us through this pandemic. But public health professionals and working and listening to the experts and following their lead, that's what's going to keep our people safe. And our people being safe is key to our people being confident when they leave their homes. And that's what's going to be key to the success of our economy going forward.
Mr. Lieutenant Governor, when we think of working in Detroit, whether fairly or unfairly, we think about the auto industry. What are the plans for bringing workers back into the plant to start making automobiles once again? And is the UAW going along with them?
Well, certainly this is a fundamental question for our economy in Michigan and frankly in the entire Midwest as we think about our regional approach to re-engaging the economy. And certainly the automakers are really itching to be able to get back to work, and their supply chains certainly are as well. We're making sure, however, that the people who work for these companies, these are our people, they need to be protected. And the UAW, I think, has been very conscientious about saying that the people are ready to work, obviously. They just want to make sure they're working in a safe environment. And the relationship with the UAW and the automakers continues to be strong as far as the communication. We're communicating with both parties and really all parties involved here. And so I think you're going to see some resolution reached that's going to work for the workers. And if it works for the workers, it'll work for the businesses and work for our economy.
Any guess about how long we are away from at least starting to open it back up?
Yeah, it's difficult to predict that because, again, what we've seen is these sort of spikes in sort of smaller areas or more rural areas. Yeah. But we don't want to make sure that their hospital systems overrun. So we're not putting an artificial date certain. What we are saying, we're telling you what we're going to pay attention to: hospital capacity, testing capacity. That's going to get us there.
Well, the news about Grand Rapids and some rural areas was not encouraging. But thank you so much. Really appreciate you being with us. That is Michigan's Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist on the situation in Michigan when it comes to the coronavirus. That's going to do it for Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio for today. A big day with markets relatively mixed because of problems with China. I'm David Weston, and this is Bloomberg Radio.
That saying, success breeds...
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care about each other, about our planet, about creating a better world for everyone, and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Imagine winning 10 grand. Yes! With Set for Life, you could win 10 grand every month for 30 years.
Get in! Amazing! Woo! Yes! Sweet! Unbelievable!
Set for Life from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Play Monday online or on the app. Prize may be capped. Rules, procedures and game-specific rules apply. Players must be 16 or over.
At the Halifax, we're all working together to be there for you.
Your money is safe in your account. However, people are using the coronavirus outbreak as an opportunity to try out new scams.
Rest assured that we will never call, text or email you asking you to move money to another account.
Neither will we ask you to share your login details.
For more information and for tips on how you can protect yourself against fraudsters, visit halifax.co.uk/security.
So however you need us, at the Halifax,
we're here to help.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
While he was gone, Al had some kind of vote to make him the managing. You remember he used to come up all the time in the Raiders game that he was the managing general partner. By the way, don't forget, there was a lot going on in Munich. But you know how tired that man was to come back and find out that Al Davis had strong-armed his team from him while he was gone?
Search The Right Time with Bomani Jones to listen.
Sports fans, this is David Jacoby telling you to check out the Chicago Bulls documentary, The Last Dance, as it continues this Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern on ESPN.
Our biggest challenge is us. I am cursed with this mentality of competitiveness.
Competition is an addiction.
Every game is a battle.
Dennis, get up here.
And then, immediately after the show, listen to Jalen Jacoby's After Show podcast featuring The Last Dance director, Jason Aaron. Search Jalen and Jacoby to start listening today.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
To help make the most of your time at home, TuneIn is sharing our top activities for social distancing. Tip number 5, cooking something. We all get stuck in a culinary rut with our normal routine. Shake things up in the kitchen by trying an ambitious new recipe or an over-the-top dessert. If cooking really isn't your thing, you can always support your local restaurants by ordering out. For more indoor inspiration, search Listen from Home on TuneIn.
Hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Business Week. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine. Plus global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
Yes, indeed. Live from New York and New Jersey, streaming on YouTube. It is Monday, May 4th, 2020. May the 4th be with you. I don't know if you noticed, Jason, but it is Star Wars Day.
I'm an American man, Carol. Do you think that was really going to go unnoticed here in my household? We're watching Rise of Skywalker tonight to celebrate. Seriously.
I know.
We know each other, don't we?
Yes, we do.
I know
yes,
you miss me. I know we haven't been together for a while, but...
Just putting it out there in case it missed...
I'm impressed. You know it.
Are you kidding? Grew up watching Star Wars, and I have a brother, too, who is obsessed.
There you go.
So anyway, all right, week 8 for many of us working from home. Jason, we were talking earlier, it's kind of all about the words, right, that we're hearing from leaders, from investors, the medical community, saying about reopening, the economy, the outlook, and the virus itself. And, you know, we heard from the man this weekend.
The Oracle of Omaha, Warren Buffett weighing in and not so optimistic, especially when it comes to airlines. We're going to talk about that later on in the show, and just not lacking that, hey, it's going to be fine, folks, that maybe we were hoping for from Uncle Warren.
No, exactly. All right, so lots to talk about on this Monday. First up, though, let's get a check on the markets and the trading day. What's going on, Charlie Pellet?
Well, let's begin with the airline stocks. They are selling off. A lot of turbulence there after what Buffett said over the weekend, getting rid of his positions in airlines. I'll begin with those numbers, then tell you what's happening with markets. UAL down 7.7%, American down 10.6%, Delta slumping 9.3%, Southwest Airlines lower now by 7.6%. As for what's happening, stocks are are falling for a third day after the U.S. escalated rhetoric against China over the coronavirus. The S&P 500 index down 11 now at 2819, a drop there of 0.4%. The Dow down 191, down 0.8%. NASDAQ higher by 25, up 0.3%. 10-year yield 0.63%. Gold up 0.5%. 17.08 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude looking at a big move there, up 2.3%. WTI up 43 cents a barrel, $20.22. Worth repeating, $20 handle now on West Texas Intermediate crude. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie. Noting, right? Yeah. I mean, what we've seen in the oil markets.
Yeah, it is really interesting. I mean, just to look at that almost as an adjunct to everything that's happening. I know it's more than an adjunct to folks who make their living there, but it is the sort of story that we would have been obsessed with, right? Obsessively covering, were we not in the midst of a pandemic, and now it's sort of rolled into all this turmoil that we've been covering. And ultimately, this is a medical issue, so we're excited to have Dr. Rod Hochman back with us shortly. He's the president and CEO of Providence Health. You'll remember, of course, that is where the first known COVID-19 case in the U.S. was, out there in Washington State.
Yeah, so always good to see what he has to say, especially as we are in a race to get a vaccine, which I really feel like that's so key to reopening up the economy as we knew it. Never too early to talk Christmas, certainly isn't in my house, but the talk today, Jason, is it's not good. And that's on a day when we saw J. Crew filing for bankruptcy. Maybe not a surprise, but we're watching that retail sector very, very closely.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, my only hope about Christmas is you're still going to make your Christmas cookies, right? That's not going to go away.
If I can get flour. Can get flour.
Oh, boy. That's dark. That's dark. All right. We are going to hear from Shake Shack. And also, we're going to hear from Todd Wadler. Interesting story. Interesting guy. He's one of the founders of Moelis & Company, the big boutique investment bank, more than a boutique at this point. But he's also co-founder and CEO of Box Union. It's a great boutique fitness joint out in L.A. I've been there. Really looking forward to catching up with Todd.
Yeah, great guest, I think, to talk to about so much that's going on in the economy. All right, in the meantime, let's talk about what's going on in the markets. Let's set the Business Week agenda on this Monday. Sarah Ponczek is with us, cross-asset reporter at Bloomberg News, on the phone from Fort Lauderdale. And Dave Wilson, of course, with us, stocks editor at Bloomberg News, on the remote access line from New Jersey. And Dave, let's just set the scene with you. Just quickly kind of go through the market activity here today, because I keep reading a lot about, that old adage, sell in May. And I do wonder if that's going to be...
It seems to be popping up quite a bit, especially, because you are talking about the S&P 500 being down for a third day in a row, and you actually have to go back to early March to see the last time that's happened. So, as much as the general direction has been up lately, it's been up and down along the way. And, in terms of what's kind of setting the tone today, I mean, clearly the airlines are front and center. 5 of the 6 biggest declines in the S&P 500 are airlines, and that's all of the carriers that are in the index. The one exception also has a coronavirus tie-in. It's Tyson Foods. I mean, they came out with their quarterly results, and they didn't exactly live up to what analysts were expecting. And, of course, looking forward, I mean, they're having issues, as are its competitors, when it comes to just being able to keep plants going because of the coronavirus that's affecting workers. So, you've got Tyson shares down 8.5%. So it's sort of right in the middle of everything when it comes to the airlines as far as that goes. So, that kind of tells you why the weight of the evidence, I guess you could say, is to lower stock prices here.
So, Sarah Ponczek, Dave mentioned some earnings. What's sort of driving the sentiment in the market from your perspective as you look across all the assets? What are people most worried about, and what are they trading on, as best you could tell?
So it looks like there's a couple of things going on here. Of course, people are very much in tune with the virus and also the reopening of economies. So people are very much paying attention to which states, which counties are opening up. What does that look like? What is the probability that we potentially get a second wave, or is this going to go ahead and be successful? That would be positive for markets. Also, any news of a vaccine or any treatments. But on top of that, I love how Carol called him the man over the weekend. I love how Warren Buffett, we can say he's a man, and we all know who you're talking about. But he came out over the weekend, and he said that he really is actually having a hard time finding opportunities and areas of the market to put money. So if you hear that one of the best investors of all time is having a difficult time finding opportunities in a market, and in a sell-off in which we saw the S&P down 35%, he's still holding on to his cash, that kind of makes you step back, look at this rebound that we've seen, and second guess whether or not we might see a return to the lows or even a further decline. And then on top of that, we also have the reemergence of words going back and forth between the U.S. and China, talks of tariffs once again. So as if the coronavirus wasn't enough, now you have people floating the idea of a trade war once again, not helping markets.
It's like we've seen this movie before, and on our planning call, Jason, rightfully so, we're going to talk to Andy Brown a lot about this and what that means, especially as all these economies, right, are trying to come back from the virus. We really need to weigh or lean on globalization, I think, to help one another to get everything back on track. Dave Wilson, we're still in the thick of earnings. Anything that we should know?
Well, I mean, after the close, you've got American International Group, AIG. But as far as the week goes, what jumps out is some of the media companies, Disney, Fox, News Corp, and DuPont, and also CVS Health. When you're talking healthcare, I mean, there's in all the main areas of healthcare between their drugstores and their drug benefit management and their health insurance. So that's going to be a stock to watch for sure here.
All right. Well, thank you both so much. We really appreciate it. Sarah Ponczak, cross-asset reporter for Bloomberg, joining us on the phone from sunny Fort Lauderdale. It's sunny here in the tri-state area, too.
It's
just probably not quite as warm.
Gorgeous.
It's really nice. Yeah, it's super nice.
A bunch of, the third kind of nice day.
Yeah, it's going to be 40 this Saturday, though. So there's that. Anyway.
Thanks, Jason.
Dave Wilson, thank you as well. We'll be back with you a little bit later with your chart and stock of the day. Let's quickly do the Bloomberg Business Week Bite of the Day. It's one number that tells us a lot. Today's number, $5 billion, Carol.
Yeah, $5 billion. So here's what's going on. Dirt cheap U.S. mortgages are being thwarted by $5 billion in margin calls. The Fed's emergency rescue of the U.S. mortgage market should have set off celebration among lenders trying to keep up with demand from borrowers. Instead, executives at Quicken Loans got a hefty margin call.
Yeah.
That's like, hello.
Yeah, it's really, it's quite a turn in that period of the market. It's one of the most read stories on the Bloomberg, so check that out for more details, because it gives you a sense of what's happening at a time where you would assume that, like, hey, rates are low, and if you got the cash, maybe, and maybe there are some deals to be had as well, although the underlying economy, they got some questions about that for sure. Let's get over to Bob Moon now. He's got your world and national headlines. Hey, Bob.
Jason, thank you. Public health experts are alarmed that many states are partially reopening their economies today because they have yet to suppress the coronavirus outbreak. Bloomberg's Martin DeCaro reports.
Internal documents obtained by the New York Times show the Trump administration is projecting 3,000 virus-related deaths per day by early June. And because some states lack enough testing, contact tracing, and hospital capacity to safely reopen, Georgetown University global health expert Lawrence Gostin says they're playing roulette with people's lives.
So I'm expecting to see, a second and a third wave of infections, or possibly even a resurgence of COVID that's exponential.
Gostin says too many elected officials and ordinary citizens continue to underestimate how contagious is the coronavirus. In Washington, Martin DeCaro, Bloomberg Radio.
The case is submitted. Chief Justice John Roberts has, with those words, wrapped up the first Supreme Court argument conducted by telephone and where audio was available live to the public. Arguments lasted about an hour and 15 minutes today. Argument had been scheduled to last an hour, as arguments in the courtroom are. Roberts kept the arguments moving by telling the two attorneys arguing, "Thank you, counsel," and "Briefly, please," when he would turn to them. Don Shula, who set a standard for the sustained excellence during a 33-year career as head coach of the Miami Dolphins and Baltimore Colts of the National Football League, has died. He was 90 years old. He died today at his home, according to the Dolphins in a Twitter announcement. He was victorious in 2/3 of the games he coached. Global News, 24 hours a day. I'm Bob Moon.
There are times when you have to go it alone, but these should not be those times.
With a medical crisis, can any other central bank execute?
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrell.
Walk me through the dynamics that are going to shape the euro in the coming months.
Weekday mornings at 7 Eastern.
Do we have the ability to coordinate with this virus?
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com.
When things move this quick, do things break?
Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Tom has been a teacher for over 40 years. One day, I think one of the students had asked the question and he didn't remember the answer. I also noticed that he was letting his class out earlier than they were supposed to let out. I was really starting to worry.
Levi and I talked about how it would change our lives, but he was there beside me.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/ourstories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies. Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
Okay, kids, Dad's gonna teach you how to dance. First, spread your feet apart. Then, pump your knee, nod your head, shake your hips, and bite your lip ever so slightly. Now, with one hand in the air, point at people with the other hand. I call that the rock star.
Dance like a dad. It's a great way to make a moment with your kids.
Now, make a face like it just smells something bad.
Visit fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
The market's in focus, every business.
The trampoline that makes Dad feel like a kid again. The projector that turns film night into outdoor cinema night. The hot tub that transforms your garden into a spa retreat. With a choice of ways to pay, you can make the most of family time. You can say yes when it matters most at very.co.uk. Goods and services provided by Shop Direct Home Shopping Limited. Credit provided. Subject to status by Shop Direct Finance Company Limited. 18+.
Get your cook on with Asda. Pick up a 7-pack of Growers Selection bananas for just £1. And 125 grams of Growers Selection blueberries. Was £1.19, now just £1. So you can get groovy with your smoothies. Store. Asda. Selected stores subject to availability.
Imagine winning 10 grand.
Yes!
With Set for Life, you could win 10 grand every month for 30 years.
Get in! Amazing! Woo! Yes! Sweet! Unbelievable!